Good morning, and I will welcome all of you to our meeting. It's nice to have you here, and those that are watching from afar, we'll call our meeting to order. And with us today is Pastor Willie Hamlin of the Emporia Avenue Church of Christ that will provide an invocation. And following Pastor Hamlin's invocation, we will have Pledge of Allegiance. We invite you to join us for both of those. Pastor Hamlin, nice to have you.
Our Holy Father, we come to you this morning thanking you for another day, for the light of a beautiful day, with the sun shining, and we welcome a chance for some warmer weather. We pray that you will continue to bless us all. Today we come to ask your presence here and your guidance and wisdom to be shared with the City Council as they are considering things that affect and influence the lives of the people of this great city. We thank you for them, that they're willing to offer themselves to serve and to spend the time and the energy that it takes. We just ask you to guide them always in their decisions. And we pray your blessings on our city, upon those who put themselves in harm's way, always to protect the rest of us. We ask you to help to protect our little ones, the homeless and the helpless, and to ensure that we continue to enjoy peace and prosperity and your loving care. We know that there's much turmoil in the world. To live in a place that has the peace that we enjoy is a great blessing to us. And we thank you and those who are, in the human perspective, responsible for that. May we never come to take for granted the peace that we enjoy. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 26th, 2019. Any changes or corrections? Seeing none, I move that we approve the meeting minutes for February 26th.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. The motion passes 7-0. We have three proclamations that the Vice Mayor is going to help with, and Councilmember Claycomb will do the last one. So, Vice Mayor, thank you. I'll just keep my germs up here.
Do we have anyone here from the Fine Arts? Whereas the City of Wichita recognized the arts education, including drama, music, dance, and visual arts, is an essential part of the basic education for all students, providing a balanced education which helps in developing their full potential. And whereas the arts enrich the lives of children, in which by developing creative ability, self-expression, self-reflection, cognitive skills, discipline, and cross-cultural understanding. And whereas the national and state professional education associations hold celebrations in the month of March focused on students participating in the arts. And whereas these celebrations give Wichita schools and those surrounding a unique opportunity to focus on the value of arts for all students, to foster cross-cultural understanding, to recognize the state's outstanding young artists, and to focus on careers in arts available to Wichita and the surrounding area students, and to enhance public support for this is an important part of the curriculum. And whereas the fine arts are a significant component of educational development, teaching them the language and the production of arts and helping them understand the role of arts in civilizations both past and present. Now therefore be it resolved that Mayor Jeff Longwell of the City of Wichita, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim March 2019 as Fine Arts in our Schools Month and call upon the people of Wichita to further encourage schools, business, media, religious institutions, and service organizations in commemorating the fine arts in our schools. All right, would you like to say any words?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Chastain, Executive Coordinator of Fine Arts for the Wichita Public Schools. The community of Wichita's nationally recognized youth arts programs are a result of superintendent leadership, Board of Education members, district and building administration, parents, and obviously city officials and community patrons, like all of you in attendance today, who all recognize the vital role that arts play in the total education of each and every student. Thank you, Wichita. And I know all Wichitans will join me in thanking our community's outstanding group of arts educators who work with Wichita students to achieve excellence in all areas of arts education. And please know, all educators are grateful for the strategic partnerships we have in our city, such as Wichita's Arts Council under the leadership of Martha Linsner, City Arts under the direction of Kay Blair, and Century 2 under the oversight of John D'Angelo, where the talent and instruction of thousands of our youth through KMEA, MTYP, all city concerts, and art exhibits can be showcased in this facility. While youth arts is obviously year-round, please take extra time this month to recognize arts education in our city. Whether it's celebrating last weekend's performances, such as Wichita Public Schools' district production of Hairspray, MTYP's Children of Eden, or the independent schools, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, or visiting the Scholastic Art Awards that are currently on display at Mark Arts until March 23rd, or attending a March music concert or festival. By the way, speaking of that independent production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, it featured our current Arts Council Youth Award winner, Edward Sturm, who is also with us today. Who better to hear than from one of our youth, right? Edward, thanks for being here today, and we look forward to your comments.
Good morning. My name is Edward Sturm, and this year I was honored to accept the Youth Recognition Award from the Wichita Arts Council. I'd first like to thank the Arts Council for their work in our community, and particularly their efforts to engage and include students in what is truly a thriving arts scene. But more broadly, I want to thank all those in Wichita who are committed to providing young people the chance to explore fine arts. I have been exceedingly lucky to grow up with both a passion for performing and with world-class performing opportunities right in my backyard. Through my involvement with the Independent School, along with Music Theater Wichita, Music Theater for Young People, and other fantastic organizations, I have reaped the benefit of holistic arts education. In my time with Music Theater Wichita alone, I've worked alongside Broadway professionals, performed in a vast range of productions, and learned what it takes to make it all work behind the scenes. These programs have been incredibly positive influences in my life. But it's not just me. Countless young people in our city have taken advantage of these and other opportunities alongside me. From theater to music to visual arts, they have had the chance to learn in our community and in our schools. Some will go on to pursue the artistic passions Wichita has helped them discover, but many more will carry the lessons, appreciation, and understanding that arts education brings into whatever field they choose. So today, I want to commend Mayor Longwell and the City Council on the recognition of the importance of arts in our schools. And I want to challenge all of us here today to take the next step and remain committed to giving the life-changing opportunities that arts education provides to all students in our community. Thank you.
Do we have anyone here from the MS Awareness Week? Good morning, how are you?
Hi, I'm Anne Reed.
Jeff, how are you? Whereas multiple sclerosis, MS, is a neurological disease in the central nervous system affecting 2.3 million people worldwide and 1 million people in the United States alone. And MS generally strikes people in the prime of their lives between ages 20 and 50, and the cause and the course of offering symptoms of MS remain unknown and no cure currently exists. And whereas the National Multiple Sclerosis Society has been committed for more than 70 years to a world free of MS, relentlessly pursuing prevention, treatments, and a cure, and has invested more than $900 million in groundbreaking research. And whereas funds raised from the National Multiple Sclerosis Society fuel $42.1 million, funding 380 research projects at the best medical centers, universities, and other institutions throughout the U.S., and ending MS forever in the mission of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, and one that all Americans and Kansans should support. And whereas Wichita recognizes the importance of finding the cause and the cure of MS and expresses its appreciation for the dedication of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society and shown toward creating a world free of MS. Now for their resolved that Mayor Jeff Longwell of Wichita and the City Council do hereby proclaim March 10th through the 16th, 2019 as MS Awareness Week, and encourage all Wichitans to learn more about MS and what they can do to support individuals with MS and their families.
I'd just say that we've got a walk event coming up and a bike event coming up, and if anyone asks you to support them, we would really appreciate you doing that, or come join us because we're going to have a good time. Thank you.
Good morning. Is there anyone here for the National Women's History Month? Good morning. Thank you for being here. Whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways, and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of the life of the nation, by constituting a significant portion of the labor force inside and outside the home. And whereas American women have played a unique role throughout the history of the nation by providing the majority of the volunteer labor force, and were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our nation. And whereas American women have served our country courageously in the military and have been leaders, not only securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas despite these contributions, the role of American women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in the literature, teaching, and study of American history. Now, therefore, it be resolved that Jeff Longwell, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, with the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2019 as National Women's History Month, and encourage all Wichitans to acknowledge the role of women in their past, current, and future lives, so that the girls and young women of today will be encouraged to overcome any obstacles in becoming the future leaders, role models, mothers, caregivers, and volunteers on which this nation depends. Thank you. I know that your colleague was ill this morning, but do you have a few words to say? All right.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joshua Payne with the Sedgwick County Register of Deeds Office, and I work in the archives and vault. Wichita has an unsung history of remarkable women such as Catherine McCarty. She was an independent business owner and the only woman to sign the petition to create the city of Wichita. History best knows her as the mother of Billy the Kid. She was born in Ireland and immigrated to New York at the age of 17. She may have been married to Patrick McCarty, Billy's father, but very little is known about their marriage, which ended with his passing. By 1867, she had moved to Indiana, where she had met William Antrim, who later became her husband. Catherine, William, and her children Billy and Joseph moved to Wichita in 1870, where she purchased property and started a laundry business near what is now the Red Cross headquarters building. On July 21st of 1870, alongside 123 men, Catherine petitioned Sedgwick County Probate Judge Reuben Riggs to incorporate the town of Wichita. After she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, the family sold their property here and moved to New Mexico. Catherine passed away at the age of 45 in 1874. Antrim sold the property and abandoned Billy and Joseph with guardians. Orphaned at 13, Billy turned to a life of crime. He was remembered after his death at the age of 21 as a gamin, an old word for a mischievous street kid, in the Wichita Weekly Eagle of 1881. Catherine's example paved the way for Wichita women in business, politics, and entertainment. Olive Ann Meller Beach, the co-founder and chairwoman of Beechcraft, Connie Ames Peters, elected mayor of Wichita in 1975, and Betty Faye McCart, elected Sedgwick County Register of Deeds in the 1970s, Oscar winner Hattie McDaniel, and Tony Award winner Carla Burns. If you want to know more about your local history, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Historical Museum is a very good place to start. The Register of Deeds office has real estate records going back to 1870, and the Kansas Historical Society manages a program that has digitized over 10 million Kansas historic newspapers, all freely available online. I would encourage everyone, know your history. Learn from it and learn from the determination of our founding mother, Catherine McCarty, and the women that built Wichita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Councilmember Claycomb, for helping with those. And I'm sure all of those that receive proclamations appreciate me staying up here on the bench. Madam Clerk, can you call the next item?
Jonathan Brickley, Benefits of Home Serve USA to the Greater Wichita Community.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan. I'm the owner of a family-owned plumbing company based out of El Dorado, Kansas. And for the last couple of years, we have been doing work for a home warranty company called HomeServe. And I'm here today to represent our relationship with them and why I think it would be a benefit to have the city of Wichita partner with this company. We've done hundreds of jobs for HomeServe, for customers in the Wichita and El Dorado and surrounding areas in the last couple of years. Just recently we had a customer here in Wichita that did not have HomeServe coverage and their sewer line failed, and we were asked to go replace it. They did not have the money to pay for this, and HomeServe stepped up and actually paid for this line to be replaced. They paid us to replace this line for the customer, without this customer actually being part of the HomeServe family at this point. We really felt like this communicated the type of company and community values that HomeServe cares about. HomeServe is partnered with the city of El Dorado, where I'm from, and they provide electrical coverage, HVAC coverage, interior plumbing coverage, and sewer line protection warranty coverage. And many people in the in the El Dorado area take advantage of this program. The reason I want to present this company to you is because I believe it's a valuable resource, and here's why I believe that. I believe it reduces costs for the city for long-term problems with sewer lines, especially as they tie into the mains. I believe it's a very good company for customers, and it's been a very good company to subcontractors such as myself. I've worked with 3 or 4 different home warranty companies over the years, and I've had nothing but bad experiences with them, unfortunately, because they don't treat their customers very well, they don't do what they say they're going to do, and they don't treat their subcontractors very well either. HomeServe is the exact opposite of this. I believe it's a value to the city and the community here because jobs will be done right the first time by licensed professionals who are vetted very carefully and not by the brother-in-law or cousin next door that'll take care of that patch job and have to deal with it down the road. I believe it's good for the people of Wichita first. It provides really good coverage for especially low to middle income people that cannot afford hundreds or even thousands of dollars to take care of their plumbing needs. I believe it's very good for the subcontractors in the Wichita area. HomeServe pays very fair rates, and actually it enhances the customer base to people who could not afford to do any type of service to now a bunch of people that can afford to do that because of this coverage. And I believe it's good for the city of Wichita. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today.
Thank you, and so that everyone understands, I don't believe that any group that wants to come in and offer that service needs our endorsement or permission. They're allowed to come in, isn't that not true, Robert? They can serve now?
Mayor, I think it depends on the relationship they're asking for.
But they have the right to offer that to whoever.
I believe that's correct based on our discussions previously.
Yeah, they don't need any special endorsement to offer that service to Wichitans.
Yeah, there are many Wichitans that have HomeServe right now. Partnering with a city provides a lower rate for these customers on a broad basis. So like in the city of El Dorado, most of our customers pay between $8 and $15 a month for coverage because it's offered, I believe, through the water, sewer, and trash bill, that the city then retains a little bit of income from that. If I'm not speaking out of turn, I believe that's how that works. And then it passes along a better rate to the customers.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, next speaker.
Amy Hammett, Cheney Reservoir.
These are my students from Mays High School. I'm not here speaking on behalf of Mays High School. We are a club at Mays High School called the Climate Club. My name is Amy Hammett. I've actually taught with your wife, Mayor Longwell, so she can tell you a little bit about my classroom and the kinds of science that we do in that classroom. I don't think Mays wouldn't claim me, but I am speaking on my own behalf. I've been teaching science for about 13 years. I have a background in healthcare and healthcare data analytics and in neuroscience. My first graduate program was in that. But I'm here to tell you about the project that these kids are doing with Cheney Reservoir. We're sampling Cheney, where about 60 to 70% of our drinking water comes from. They go Wednesdays and Saturdays, alternating according to their schedules. They're basically filtering out sediments from the water, chlorophyll, from the algal blooms that are in the water. And the University of Missouri is actually testing their samples for microcystins and for phytoplankton, just to tell us how healthy the water actually is. This is part of the Reservoir Observer Student Science Project that the University of Missouri started. I was put in contact with them through Dr. Ted Harris, who advises our legislature here in Kansas on harmful algal blooms. He picked 2 teachers in the state of Kansas that he knew had the background and capacity to be involved with that project. We're aware of some of the other crucial parts of the water plan that you deal with, volatile organic compounds from the old Coleman plant, the chloride intrusion from Hutchinson. We've talked quite extensively with the Kansas Water Office, Mr. Matt Unruh, with the Equus walnut bed. We email back and forth quite a bit. We know about the rapid depletion of the aquifer and all the efforts that you've taken in ASR. Some of the students in my classroom have family that work at ASR, and so we've taken tours of that facility, and your employees here in the city of Wichita have done a great deal to educate us, me included. So it's been an adventurous year of water for us. We also know a lot about induced seismicity. from wastewater injection processes. We've worked with Kansas Geological Survey on that. So my job, I am a Kansas State Department of Education master science teacher. I write curriculum for the National Science Foundation, and I'm always looking for real-world science projects to put in the hands of kids across the nation. So originally I wrote this project for some real science for my kids to do. These boys in particular came to me because they wanted something meaningful to do for our community. They really cared to do something more than play video games, which is uncommon for kids, right? They really wanted to advocate for children and families, and they were looking for a project. So they asked if they could put up a windmill, and I told them about this, because I really did need some help getting out to the reservoir every week. It's quite a task. We have several partners. I've mentioned Dr. Ted Harris at Kansas Biological Survey. He advises us. We partnered with United States Geological Survey. We're actually meeting with them in 2 days to start sampling at their site. We're going to spend some time with them at their lab and see how we do things with the water in Cheney, Kansas Water Office I mentioned, and all of the good people that work for the city of Wichita who work around this water system that we have. Last week, our students went to talk to the EPA. They went to the water conference. They were invited to apply for a presidential award. They won $10,000 from Lexus to pursue this project. The second page that I gave you has some science data that I wasn't going to read. I just wanted to make sure that you had it. And the rest of this packet really outlines the R programming model that we are working with, and then why we're working with USGS to take better data so that you have a more predictive model when harmful algal blooms will occur in Cheney. We think this will save you a significant amount of money. I spoke actually last night to Ron Henry, one of your Assistant Director of Public Works, about that, and so I sent him all of that information as well. So we're basically monitoring the stratification of the water in the reservoir to inform that our predictive model. So thank you for talking with us today, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
So Amy, thank you for providing these real-world opportunities for these students. For the record, my wife loves working with you too.
I love her too, yeah.
But we certainly appreciate it, and we think it will add a lot of value.
Yes, sir.
So we look forward to the information that you were able to provide us and working together for a potential new solution. So
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the students that were able to come down here. We appreciate you getting involved. So
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Paul Sawatsky, Striker Soccer Complex.
Hello, thank you for giving me a voice today. I represent the Wichita Wingmen Lacrosse Club and all other sports being left out by the Striker Soccer Complex at this moment, a facility that was billed as a multi-sport facility. I've lived in Wichita for the past 7 years and have been playing with the Wingmen during that time. I am here to express the team's frustration with how Striker is being operated by a private, for-profit company that is effectively pricing out any other sport other than soccer. Things that were promised to the public regarding the renovation are not being followed through on. A few examples: on December 5th, 2017, the contract was awarded to Multicon Inc. for the turf for roughly $5.4 million, but also included soccer goals, youth and full size, and 8 lacrosse goals. Also on December 5th, the council was asked for $8 million to procure synthetic turf. Through research, Shaw Turf representative that installed the fields, I was told that for any permanent line package, lacrosse, rugby, football, it would have been minuscule to the actual amount of the turf. I'm talking 0.005% of the total cost of the turf. The city must have known about the growth of lacrosse in Wichita, or they would have not approved 10,000 plus on 8 lacrosse goals, 7,000 more than what I could secure 8 goals for. On December 11, 2017, KWCH ran an article where former council member Metzner is quoted saying, "The main intent is to create a new and improved youth sports complex." He goes on to say, "We're getting a lot of feedback from around the region. We will now be a destination for soccer tournaments and other kinds of sports events can be on it. Football, rugby, lacrosse is kind of growing a lot, so it's going to be a well-used from what we are hearing." The Wichita Eagle story in January 2018 on what to expect when Stryker reopens stated the main goal is to create a more attractive and efficient facility that will bring more youth soccer tournaments to Wichita. Also to create better spaces for locals to play soccer and other field sports, including football, rugby, and lacrosse. The city would have had the backing 100% of Wichita if they would have committed to reinvest this property back into youth and local community as stated. But instead, according to the same article, they have missed out up to $2.1 million just in field rentals and hotel taxes. After the 10-year agreement with the Wichita Sports Forum, the city will only have recovered $1.265 million of the rental as opposed to approximately $18 million of revenue based on field rental and use. In the same Wichita Eagle article, Troy Hotman of the Parks and Rec stated, "The fields will be marked for soccer, but there will be additional small markings on the fields to act as guides for converting to other sports. Workers will be able to use those guides to paint in lines for whatever sport they want. The paint they'll use can quickly be washed off with water and brushes when the game is over." There are no other sport markings. When I asked about lacrosse lines, I was given the same answer as that I previously stated. But that machine to line the fields is not currently with the facility and will be contracted out for an additional cost to the teams renting these fields. When I asked for a price, I was given $1,000 for one lacrosse field. Not only are these ridiculous prices, but these could have been avoided if the turf fields installed were already lined for multiple sports with different colors to maintain the desired goal of keeping the cost, effectiveness, and maintenance of the facility at a minimum and grow a variety of youth sports. Why would we not just install 3 to 5 fields lined with soccer, football, rugby, and lacrosse? If the main objective of converting the facility from grass to turf was less maintenance, the city has effectively missed that goal, and Stryker management is effectively pricing out other sports out of using that facility. In closing, I would like to call to action the city council members to have an oversight function of this facility with a monthly public hearing so the public can express views and the council can maintain oversight capability. The idea of charging back costs to the teams or individuals renting a field for lining for the desired sporting event is absurd. You do not rent a car and have to pay extra for tires, correct? After only roughly $5 million was spent on synthetic turf after $8 million was allocated according to an article, that left roughly $2.8 million. I believe those funds should be either allocated to fund the lining of fields for sports other than soccer for the duration of turf life, or to replace existing fields with multi-sport lines permanently embedded. It will cost approximately $460,000 per field, and you could do 6. I am also asking for the city to live up to their agreement with the people of Wichita. The main purpose of the project was to grow a variety of youth sports, and with this current model, that will not happen.
Thank you, Paul. Where do you currently play the lacrosse? What fields are you using?
We used to play at Stryker when they were grass, and the city would line and cut the fields.
So you don't have a current field at all?
Right now, we do not have a current field. And I've talked to the GM at Stryker, and they are working on trying to find a viable option to paint the lines, but I've called the turf manufacturer. I've got paint, quantity, amount, what it's priced out at, what machines they need, and I have another job also. I mean, this guy, this is his main job. He has a second job as well, but right now they're wanting to charge Pee Wee football $3,000 to line one football field. And the paint that we can use on that field will last up to 6 to 8 months. And they want to rub it off after because they think too many lines on, the field will confuse the players and refs, and that is not the case. If you've ever played on turf, you know what lines you are. They're marked different colors for a reason. They set cones out. I think it's right now it's being mismanaged, and if you're not a soccer player, you are not going to use this state-of-the-art facility, and I don't think that's acceptable.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Claycomb?
I don't have thank you very much. I don't have a question, but I would like to ask staff to look at this and let us know what's going on. Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My same comments as well. I was just curious what kind of check and balance system we have. So if you get back to us.
Staff will be happy to do that. All right, Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
James Bowers, HomeServe USA Home Warranty Involvement with City of Wichita and homeowners in Wichita, Kansas.
Good morning, City Council, and those of you in the audience. My name is Jim Bowers. I work with Bowers Plumbing Company, who has served the Wichita community here since 1955. I'm here to speak on behalf of HomeServe as Jonathan Brinkley did. A little bit of history about a HomeServe. HomeServe started in England in 1993 with the goal of providing citizens with affordable home warranty for their plumbing systems. In 1998, HomeServe expanded into Europe with the same goal to provide affordable plumbing to its citizens. And around 2003, HomeServe started in USA under the name of HomeServe USA. And around 2010, a HomeServe representative came into my office to share with me the concept and goal of HomeServe USA. And I immediately grasped their goal and signed on with HomeServe, becoming the first plumbing contractor to represent HomeServe here in Wichita. They have very affordable rates for the low-income and underprivileged citizen. You can get, for $5 a month, you can get warranty on your water service main from the water meter to the house. On an average, when we replace those in the city here, they will average anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a replacement. For $7 a month, they offer sewer service, which warranties the sewer from the house to the city sewer main. And again, on an average, our price for a sewer replacement can range from $2,500 to $3,000. They also have interior service warranty, which covers all interior plumbing and water heaters. And they can get that for $20 a month. Recently, in the past, we did a job for HomeServe for a widow here in Wichita. She was in her 80s, but she was a smart widow. She had the water service warranty, the sewer warranty, and the interior service warranty. Cost her a total of about $37 a month. In an 18-month period, we replaced her water main from her house to her, from the main to the house, which was $1,700. We replaced her sewer from her house to the city main, which is a long sewer. She lived on a half-acre lot. HomeServe paid me $3,700 to do that. A few months later, her water heater failed, and HomeServe paid me $950. So this widow came out very, very well. Just to give you an idea of what HomeServe can offer to the low income and the average citizen. HomeServe USA has already partnershiped with 600 cities nationwide. And I've got a letter here from, I'd like to read portions of it. It's from the National League of Cities, and it's entitled, Dear City Official, for the last 8 years, the National League of Cities has been pleased to partner with Utility Service Partners, which is a HomeServe company, and offering the NLC service line warranty program. During this time, in 8 years, the program has grown to serve more than 500 municipalities and over 400,000 customers. Homeowners have saved more than $64 million in repair costs since the program's inception. Offered at no cost to cities, the National League of Cities Service Line Warranty Program educates homeowners about their service line responsibilities and offers affordable protection for unanticipated and often costly repairs to broken or leaking water and sewer lines. In addition to offering important coverage to residents, the program makes financial sense for the city, providing a non-tax revenue stream that can be dedicated to a number of important initiatives. Additionally, the program keeps dollars in the local economy by utilizing local contractors to execute the repairs. And this was written by Clarence E. Anthony, Chief Executive Officer of the National League of Cities. So I would recommend the city considering partnershiping with HomeServe. HomeServe is a giant among home warranty companies. As Jonathan Brickley said, he's worked with other home warranty companies. I've worked with 5 or 6 of them. And on every occasion, that home warranty is questioning you about your price or questioning the customer or their policyholder.
James, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Are there any questions, Vice Mayor?
I got a mayor first, or a question for staff. What's our policy on coming to promote private business here at the council meeting?
Good morning, Vice Mayor Jennifer McGowan, the city attorney. The city council has a policy on a public agenda that opens the public agenda to the public. It limits time, frequency of appearance. It does exclude categories of speech such as violations of law, personnel matters, and matters of quasi-judicial interest. That's the exclusions that are in the ordinance at this time.
Okay, so anybody in town can come here and pitch their business for 5 minutes to the council?
That's what the ordinance would seem to allow.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you call the next item? Or next
Geneva
person?
Smith, criminal investigation accountability regarding the death of her son.
Good morning. My son was killed January 21st here in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay, we're going to have you just pull that mic up a little
Pull it
closer.
up. My son was killed here on January 21st. And Mark Bennett decided on the 27th of February that he wasn't going to pursue charges, not even a simple child endangerment, stating that Kansas laws, there's no law stating that firearms have to be locked away. Mr. Bennett also stated that they did have a gun safe, but the gun safe had been compromised months prior. In 2017, 5 children had been injured or resulted in death because of gun violence. In 2018, there were 11. As of 2019, my son was the only one that has been hurt that resulted into death. And all of these children were under the age of 11. These are also all children in the state of Kansas. I believe every citizen has the right to bear arms, but I believe that there should be extra measures in a home where there's children, where things like this is not going to happen again. No mother should have to bury their child, and especially in a tragic way. On January 21st, not only that my household was affected tremendously, there was another household that was affected tremendously. And because of irresponsible gun owners, this all could have been prevented. I propose that a law has to be placed in order in the state of Kansas regarding gun safety and keeping them away from children. I'm not trying to shy away from the fact that you have the right to bear arms. I'm not saying that, but I feel that there should be rules and regulations. Things like this can be prevented, honestly. I feel if you do have a gun and you do have children in your home, then there should be a law stating that this has to be locked up in a certain type of way where a child cannot get this gun. Guns are fatal. That's fatal. My son cannot come back. If there was a law in place and someone has to be accountable for the actions of not having your gun securely locked away. I'm not saying take away, I'm not banning guns. I mean, because a lot of people say that, oh, do you want to ban guns? No, I feel like you have the right to have a gun, but I feel like that you should have it locked away where a child, these children, my child was 9, the other child was 11. How did they get into a gun safe? That's not right. It's not fair. I'm proposing that you guys create a law called the Royale Law, where you lock up guns in the home that you have children. And if something like this happens, someone is held accountable. I thank you guys for your time.
Geneva, thank you, and it certainly can't be easy for you to come down and share, and we can't even imagine what you're going through, and agree that no one should have to bury their child. And so our condolences and sympathies are with you, and we appreciate you sharing what you believe is a way to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Consent agenda items 1 through 13.
Any items that need to be pulled for discussion or clarification? Seeing none, I move that we approve consent agenda items 1 through 13.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated March 4th, 2019.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance. Today I present to you the Board of Bids formal bid report from the March 4th Board of Bids. First engineering bid we have is downtown fiber and signalization upgrade. Recommendation is deferred to March 18th. Next engineering bid is 2019 sanitary sewer reconstruction phase 2. Recommended award is Amigo Excavation and Plumbing for $377,777.77. Next engineering bid is 12-inch water line in Broadway from 55th Street to 63rd. Recommendation is Nowak Construction for $237,324.25. Next engineering bid is Water Distribution System to serve Rocky Ford, 2nd edition. Recommended award is Donliner and Sons Construction for $40,275. Next engineering bid is paving on Wheatland Avenue. Recommended award is Pearson Construction for $281,348. Next engineering bid is Sanitary Sewer System to serve Chapel Hill, 3rd edition. Recommended award is Donliner and Sons Construction for $46,786. First purchasing bid we have is swimming pool repairs. Recommended is Wildcat Painting for $79,400. Next purchasing bid we have is a 9,000 GVW regular cab and chassis pickup. Recommendation is deferred to March 18th, 2019 Board of Bids date. And last purchasing bid we have is chiller controls and variable frequency drive upgrade. Recommended award is Carrier for $127,488. That is all the bids. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, I move that we approve the award of bids as mentioned.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public hearing, issuance of educational facility revenue bonds, Friends University.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the item before you today is a request for the issuance of industrial revenue bonds for Friends University. Friends University is a Christian university that was founded by Quakers in 1898, currently has enrollment of approximately 1,600, is located near the intersection of Kellogg and Meridian. You can see here Kellogg running along the south side of this aerial and Maple Street on the north side of the aerial. On December 4th of 2018, the City Council approved a letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $5 million. The bonds will primarily be used to refinance approximately $4 million of outstanding debt. This debt was originally issued through the Kansas Independent College Finance Authority, and by refinancing this debt, the university will recognize an interest savings. In addition to refinancing the outstanding debt, the university plans to install new turf at the Adair Austin Field, upgrades to the boiler for the Davis Administration Building, which is the main administration building at Friends University, as well as potential acquisition of property that is adjacent to the university. This is an aerial of the Adair Austin Field and the Davis Administration Building. The university is able to achieve a sales tax exemption through the state of Kansas. They are not requesting a property tax abatement because as a 501c3, they are able to achieve it in their own right. Folston Siefken will be serving as Friends Counsel, and Intrust Bank is planning to purchase the bonds. Therefore, it is the staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing and place on first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of tax-exempt educational facilities revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $5 million for Friends University, and authorize the necessary signatures. Vernon DeLiesel, who is the Vice President of Finance for Friends University, is here and can answer any questions specific to the university, and I would be happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? If you'll want to address the council, come to the podium, state your name, and
good morning, Mayor Longwell, thank you, and to city council members, thank you.
your name is?
My name, thank you. My name is Brock E. Booker, Booker T. Washington descendant, Kansas side, returning singing Quaker, formerly SGA Friends University. So I just wanted to make a few remarks in regards to going back a few years. And this was underneath the president then, President T.J. Arant, when he was in town. And I know many people he was good friends with, and very active traveler and fitness advocate. And he and his wife were lovely, I wish. Anyway, my point is that there were many decisions that he made, and microeconomically, that affected many students at the school. And I think that this, for instance, in the Delano district, there was a purchase of a building that it was purchased. Of course, Friends is landlocked, but that does not mean that it was a good business deal to go and purchase that for the Arts Center. And so it was either sold back, and We'll have to check the record on that. So I didn't have all of the facts today. I can provide those. I don't want to be held accountable for that just yet. This was impromptu. But that was one thing that the building wasn't even worth. Maybe I've got that twisted around. What it was being spent for, it was going to cost double or triple what, it wasn't a good business deal. It was just poppycock. So there are things that affected me at the school as an undergraduate student, such as another instance where we were limited 8 hours or less as federal student workers. So therefore, I had to leave. I was the under guy to Max Burson at the time, the director of the library, because I still want to pursue an MLS, a Master's in Library Science. Particularly, just coming out of Black History Month, we need to see more minorities in those type of positions throughout the country and throughout the world. We need to see, more of that in our American culture, in our Wichita, and throughout culture. And so, with that, 8 hours at a school that costs $20,000 a year, you do the math. Can I get a witness? Can I get any questions?
Any questions for the speaker?
But I want to comment, Mr. Mayor, if I may. I know I've got a little bit of time.
You need to tie it into the agenda item.
The public hearing on the insurance issuance educational facility revenue. I'm going to close with so at the school, I was forced to go off campus to start a career that I hadn't planned in menswear, and it ended up working out greatly for me. I think I've sold to.
So Brock, we need you to speak to the item at hand. Are you lobbying for or against the bonds?
Oh, I'm for the bond. I'm for the bond. But yes, Mr. Mayor, of course. But my point is, the reason why we're here, I feel, is because there was money that was lost or not allocated properly. Somewhere there was a big hit. There was a deficit due to lack of leadership under the time of T.J. Aran.
Thank you.
We can talk privately more at a better time. Forgive me.
Thank you.
I was out of turn.
Any other speakers? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. I'll turn this over to the Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. I'd like to take staff's recommended action to close the public hearing, place on first reading on bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of tax-exempt educational facilities revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $5 million for Friends University, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Petitions to renovate building facades for 4 buildings and asbestos remediation for 3 downtown buildings.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council. Mark Elder with the Office of Economic Development. The item before you today, a local developer has acquired 4 buildings downtown, has requested facade improvements on all 4 and asbestos remediation on 3 of those. The former state office building has already been remediated, so that one does not require additional remediation. Those buildings are the Broadway Plaza at 105 South Broadway, Henry's at 124 South Broadway, the former state office building or the Ennis and Macy's buildings at 130 South Market and 230 East William, which is only requesting the facade, as well as the Sutton Place building. This aerial is to kind of depict how they're located all together, and the developer is doing a project that includes all 4 of those buildings as part of her redevelopment. This project is the rehabilitation of those buildings for a future hospitality and educational complex utilizing those 4 buildings. The total project cost for the asbestos remediation is approximately $12 million. Those facade improvements will include the window and door replacement, the tuck pointing repair where needed, as well as the additional restoration to bring those buildings back to historic look, as well as meeting code requirements. The State Office building had some changes done when it was last remodeled, so that will be done to bring that back into historic relevance as well. And then the remediation it will be done along, it's authorized under the state statute, the same under the facade improvements that authorizes the city to finance those for public safety reasons to remediate that asbestos. The table here does the breakdown of the facade and asbestos costs between those buildings. You can see at the bottom right there, the total is $12 million. It's approximately $1 million for the asbestos, and the $11 million is for those facade improvements among those 4 buildings. These are a few renderings of what the building is proposed to do. A lot of it is the cleanup repair of the facade, as well as those new windows and doors. The first floor is a lot of where you can see some of those more drastic changes on those. This is the Broadway Plaza building. And then the Henrys, there'll be, all those, the plywood and the images on the first floor will be replaced with the windows. They'll be restoring the rest of the facade, any bricks, anything else that needs cleaned up or repaired. The same with this here, where we're looking kind of from the southwest, looking northeast at the entrance to the building, and the improvements they'll be making there as well. The State Office building, again, it's a lot of cleanup window replacement. You can see on the first floor, they're completely going back to the original look, which was changed about 20 to 30 years ago when it was last remodeled, bringing back those awnings and the original looking windows on the first floor. Sutton building here, again, it's a lot of replacement, cleanup, fixing the windows, as well as just another image here of what they're planning on doing with those repairs. And then the last building, last image here, the Sutton, again with kind of showing the revised entrances, the improvements being made with those costs. This program does use special assessment finance, where the specials are spread against those properties with the interest rate set by the bond sale in over 15 years. On this project, the owner will pay the construction cost up front and will be reimbursed when the project is complete. There are additional stipulations that we'll get to that will be met before those facade and asbestos remediation funds are released to the developer. First off, for the asbestos remediation reimbursement, all buildings will be required to have a certification from a certified remediation company that certifies that remediation is complete. In addition, the Broadway Plaza will have to have evidence of a lease or franchise agreement with a Marriott hotel. And then the Sutton Place will also require an executed development agreement with the city for the overall project, evidence that they have candidate status or they're in the process with a medical school, which the candidate status gives that evidence, and as well as an agreement between the developer and the operator for that medical school. For the Sutton reimbursement, which is that larger number, all those buildings will need the executed development agreement, certificate of occupancy for those buildings. Broadway Plaza will need a certificate of occupancy for a hotel, as well as those previous requirements that were done for the asbestos remediation. Henry's building would also require, in addition to the asbestos requirements, the lease with the technical school for at least 25,000 square feet. The Sutton Place, as well as the former State Office building, would require now the evidence of pre-accreditation with that medical school, proof of funding and operating escrow with that medical school, as well as an executed lease for 150,000 square feet with that medical school. Now with that, so today's action would authorize those projects to move forward, and then there to be additional action calling a public hearing on the 19th to set the maximum special assessments for these projects. And then again, with that, following the completion of those improvements and the developer meeting those requirements set forth in those petitions and the agreements, that's when the reimbursement could be made for that criteria. The representatives from the developer are here as well to answer any questions, as well as staff can answer any questions for these projects.
So one thing you can clear up, because I think many of us saw the headlines this week that appeared the city was just going to hand the developer $12 million. Can you explain how that $12 million exchange happens and then how it gets actually assessed?
Correct. We use the special assessment program, which is established through the state statutes, but really what it does is it establishes a lien against those buildings, and it's a 15-year loan that is repaid back by the property owner over those 15 years. So it is a 15-year loan against that property, paid over 15 years. So it's and it's paid through those special assessments. So every year when you get the tax statement, you would also have that special assessment payment on your tax payments. And on top of that, what we have done on this situation is that no payment until those requirements are done. So the city, we've done whatever steps we can to remediate any risk against the city to have disperse any funds until there's evidence of those projects occurring and something satisfactory to the city that there will be projects that can sustain those payments for the 15 years that we've lent that money.
Thank you. Just want to make sure everyone understood that the developer's not getting a free $12 million handout.
Correct.
Mayor, if I could, I also want to piggyback on that. And this is the same mechanism that's used to install water and sewer and streets in private subdivisions throughout the city, special assessments. So this is not a unique financing mechanism just for projects like this.
And we've done facade programs all over downtown.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench, and we'll turn it over to council member. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Is there any kind of personal guarantees or anything that are signed on these?
For these facade portions, there's no personal guarantee. It's these other guarantees we've done through there. We do have a 1 year worth of debt service reserve financed into that. So if there is a missed payment or default, we have a reserve that we can cover 1 year's debt service, because with the lien and the easement against those buildings, somebody doesn't pay their taxes, it goes to a tax sale. So we have that 1 year debt service to kind of cover us when that building goes to a tax sale. Otherwise, we have that 15-year lien against the building itself.
I'd like Joe Norton to talk about our position on a special assessment.
Good morning, Joe Norton with Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel. Mr. Vice Mayor, like any other special assessment project, once the project is done, then the requirements for expenditure of reimbursement funds back to the developer, which Mark outlined in the documents, occur, then the city would go through its normal process of issuing general obligation bonds for those payments of those costs. And those would be spread over 15 years. The amount of those assessments would go on to property tax statements, and if not paid, like any other property taxes, would constitute a lien on that project, subject to foreclosure, to get those payments back. One of the things that was negotiated into those requirements is that typically, if the project is done and complete, a certificate of occupancy is done, the medical school accredited, chances are really good that either one, the developers put equity into that building to allow that valuation to occur, or two, there's probably a substantial mortgage by a lender on that building. Our experience has been, if that's the case, either one, that the payment of the taxes, special assessments, is a very small component of what the tax foreclosure sale would be, and those payments of taxes get paid first. So there's no personal guarantee with this component. As the project moves forward, there may be other development agreement things that may have those guarantees in them, but that's not before you today.
So we feel like there's plenty of cushion to make the city whole if something did happen?
Right, no, but I think that the idea is that the building have to be complete, they have to be occupied for the intended uses before we put a dime out to reimburse them.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joe. Councilmember Claycomb.
I have a question, Joe, thanks. So it appears to me that this has less risk, this has less risk than a normal special assessment in a subdivision, because we built in these performance metrics. Is that true?
Yes, there's a completion requirement. In some of the special assessment projects you have, there's a requirement for a letter of credit for a small percentage of a cost of an improvement, but not the improvement actually being completed. Like in a residential subdivision, it would have the equivalent of a house has to be finished, it has to be occupied, and there's someone to pay the taxes, basically. So that's the same kind of equivalent we would have there, which we don't go that far in a typical residential transaction.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Joe, thank you. We appreciate your explanation. And I will hand this off to Councilmember Johnson, but I do just want to share that it's nice to see people that want to invest in the core of our city and spend literally millions of dollars to make some dramatic repairs to some old buildings that have obviously been sitting idle for far too long. And for them to want to invest says a lot about both where they believe Wichita is at today and where Wichita is headed in the future. And so, Councilmember Johnson, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate and echo your comments as well, the investment in downtown, and my concerns were alleviated. So with that, I would recommend that or I would move that we take the staff's recommended action.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Approve the private development agreement with Wichita Riverfront LP.
Good morning, Mayor. Scott Rigby, City Manager's Office, Office of Economic Development, here today to discuss the proposed stadium private development with Wichita Riverfront LP. Before we get into those details, I want to go back a couple of years as we started down this road with the effort to bring affiliated baseball back to Wichita. As we went out in that effort, starting back in 2017, the goal was to attract affiliated baseball back to Wichita. We knew we need to pay homage to the NBC history here. As we went through that process, we did an analysis, independent analysis of what the impact would be to bring baseball back. As you'll see here on the chart, it's projected over an annual impact of approaching 900,000 visitors. That would be both local as well as external visitors coming to this. In addition, how do we make improvements to the riverfront as well as a future pedestrian bridge connecting the West Bank to the East Bank? And the other part of that I'd go back is catching the vision back at that point as the mayor and council was the effort to bring baseball was about baseball, but as well as deal with the issue of talent recruitment and growth of our community. And as we heard from our business community, to bring amenities such as baseball and an entertainment district around this area would help drive interest for people who are outside of Wichita to consider employment in Wichita, those that are here to considering opportunities for growth elsewhere, that they remain here in Wichita. This was a key item as we went through the discussion with some of our businesses here in town. So as we went out to the baseball market, which is a very unique market, we looked at our assets that we had here around the stadium. The stadium comprises approximately 24 acres. You'll see of the old Lawrence Dumont Stadium with the parking and as the finger of land that goes up the riverbank. That 24 acres is city-owned, and we knew as we went out to the market, as we talked with our baseball consultants, what would be able to attract interest of a team that's currently in another market to explore Wichita as a market. And three things really jumped out is to build and open a new stadium in a compressed amount of time. As we know today, that compressed amount of time resulted in a 2020 opening commitment, as well as providing assurances that financing was already in place and secured. And then also to encourage ownerships to consider Wichita was to provide adjacent development opportunity for ownership groups. These were key as we went to the market, and the baseball market's pretty unique. There's only 32 teams in each level, AAA, AA, or single A. We were not interested in single A. We were looking at either AA or AAA. And with that, only certain teams within the territorial could be eligible to move, so our market was very small. So to gain entrance into that market and to gain activity and response, we knew we had to bring forward these three components to gain entrance. So going backwards in that discussion, we knew part of it was securing financing for the stadium. Back in 2017 and through 2018, we secured star bonds to the tune of $40 million. We set up a tax increment financing district, as well as we initiated the effort to explore CID for in and around the stadium, as well as we knew there may be a portion of the project that may need general obligation bonds. Just a reminder back, as we looked at the Ballpark Village financing, so this is the stadium and surrounding area. As you'll see on the left is the Stadium Museum is about $75 million mixed between STAR, TIF, CID, and GO. And that contract's out on the, we know J.E. Dunn and others that are doing the stadium today. The bridge and riverbank, which we currently have not extended that contract, that RFP to secure that activity, as well as utilities and infrastructure, which is the utilities necessary to service the stadium. So this is a key factor for us to attract interest. And the success that we saw in late 2018, as we all were involved with, is that we were successful in landing a Pacific Coast League and New Orleans franchise to relocate to Wichita. That's pretty significant to come out of a major market like New Orleans to consider Wichita. It fit nicely with Pacific Coast League with our area teams of Oklahoma City and Des Moines. That allows us to bring a AAA ballpark, which I think many in the community were surprised that we were able to secure that top level of minor league baseball here. And in doing so, we had two commitments, two legal agreements, was the ballpark development that talks specifically about the $75 million going into the stadium, as well as the facility use. And just briefly recapping those, that we will design and build a new stadium that's currently under construction today at a cost not to exceed $75 million, and that stadium has to be done by March 15th, 2020, which fits into one of those three original requirements that we were tasked with. In addition to that they would relocate the New Orleans franchise to Wichita. The city also, the team also agreed to commit between $5 and $7.5 million for furniture, fixtures, and equipment within that ballpark. That's at a cost savings to to the city. And additionally, they agreed that if and when a CID is created to cover the ballpark and the surrounding area, that they would not be in opposition to that. On the facility use management agreement, they're going to serve as our facility manager of the facility. That is a 20-year agreement with additional extension options. They will pay us $350,000 to facility manage that facility for us. As some of you have heard from the team owner, that they've committed to do up to 200 events a year to bring to the stadium and surrounding area. The team will also pay all utilities. They'll maintain the facility, including the exterior and interior, all at a significant cost saving for a city. Many cities across the country that do ball fields with baseball or other, sometimes required to cover those costs, but in this situation, we've transferred that cost and obligation to the team. And again, that we've come to an agreement in that original that when we are successful in securing naming rights, that we will receive up to $250,000 a year for that naming rights for the facility. Again, the CID and the 20-year management agreement. The third component, as we talked about, the original three components of being able to attract affiliate baseball back, was development opportunity adjacent to the stadium. In our discussion with the team, in order for us to secure their committee to come to Wichita, we were agreeable to that with the component they had to commit to certain performances of certain size in order to make our payments on the debt of the stadium. So in part of that, the development opportunity is split into 3 phases. They can do it all at once, or they can spread it across 3 different phases, but each phase calls out certain requirements. Phase 1, which must start within 90 days, they have to decide whether they want to go ahead and purchase a portion or all the available private development sites, which we'll identify here in a minute. And if they do that within the 90 days, then they have to exercise their start of construction within 12 months after that. So within 15 months after the opening of the stadium, they have to start construction of a minimum of 30,000 square feet of commercial development on the ground floor. The reason it's important on the ground floor, that's mainly where you're going to see the CID generation, not only for our local CID, but also for star bonds. And then within 18 months of start of that construction, they have to complete that. If they do that, then they have an opportunity to continue on to phase 2, which again requires another 12 months to start construction and 18 months to complete, and complete an additional 20,000. If they do that, then they can roll into phase 3, which is an additional 15,000. Again, these are all components for us to secure the necessary funding to help offset the stadium debt service. So we wanted to go back and show the site. The site on the left is the 24 acres that the city currently owns. The stadium today is designed, will approximately take up 16 acres. And just as visual on your right, you'll see the site plan for the new stadium. So I just want to compare the old Lawrence Dumont, which is a much smaller, compact area, to the future stadium, which goes all the way essentially from McLean all the way over to Sycamore. So that took a much larger footprint, which leaves us, after you take out the roads and the riverfront, approximately between 4 and 4.5 acres of eligible development sites. The city will retain ownership of the stadium, the roads, the riverfront embankment improvements. The remaining 4 to 4.5 acres is what's eligible for private purchase and development. Now, if the team or the Wichita Riverfront LP decides not to proceed, they obviously can make that choice within the first 90 days to decline. If they do choose to move forward and purchase and start development, and if at any point they fail to complete that required phase within the certain 18 months, and they make no efforts to remedy that commitment for construction, the city will have the opportunity or the right to repurchase those properties back for city control. In addition, if they do development, we want it to be the right type of development in that it's not cannibalizing the surrounding area. So in addition, once they finish phase 1, they have committed to a 10-year moratorium on going out and recruiting existing businesses within a 2-mile radius. Now, existing business that wants to expand and open up a second location, that's eligible, but if not, they cannot recruit or bring that group. And so this is a map that you'll just see here on the right. The red is the stadium site, and you'll see the distance is roughly 2 miles out in any direction. In addition, the developer, in the vision that we've decided for this area is to create an entertainment district around the stadium, was we're producing a ballpark village master plan. Some of you have seen that, along with the Delano neighborhood plan. They've agreed that they will design any type of development they propose in concert with that, and so it'll adhere to that. And just we want to provide some visuals of what the ballpark village master plan is envisioning. You'll see these images evoke storefronts, close up to the street, walking areas, landscaping, parking, much more walkable. The idea is that people can move back and forth along McLean. You'll see multimodal going through for bikes and other activities. And again, the goal, as we talked back in the early design effort for the city, was the opportunities around the stadium were to provide spilling out either prior or post events into this area. In addition, you'll see here on the top 2 images, you'll see riverfront development. You'll see the riverfront there on the left. The idea is to pull activities close to the river, but as well as provide and maintain public space between the retail edge and the river edge. So people can continue to walk, bike, activate that river edge, as well as the retail development taking advantage of that as well. The key in all this for the Ballpark Village Master Plan is to do 4-sided architecture, meaning there's no back of house. So whichever direction you come to that commercial venture, that looks appropriate, so you're not looking at the back of a building. So you'll see even on these multi-story buildings that there's always activation along the street scale. In consideration of these commitments from the team, the city has agreed to allow them to purchase roughly that 4.5 acres for $1 an acre. In addition, some additional commitments they've made is if any hotel is proposed within that private development area, it has to meet these certain standards of quality. For similar type of hotels such as a loft, courtyard, DoubleTree, 4 Points, and you can read those. And again, the goal is we're trying to attract a unique clientele that's coming there either to watch the game, or if not watching the game, that want to take advantage of the entertainment district and that lifestyle. These development sites will be located within a planned unit development, or PUD. The parties agree that neither party will be required or obligated to replace any parking lost or removed at the site of the development contemplated on the private development site, and that the city will redesign and reconstruct McLean Boulevard at its sole cost and expense into a pedestrian-friendly two-way public street. The primary purpose, which is to encourage pedestrian, bike, and vehicular access to coexist. And again, we talk about the stadium as pre and post events, the opportunity potentially you could shut off McLean at certain locations to allow that activity to spill out into the street and allow people to move back and forth within certain areas. And then when it's non-game day or non-event, the McLean Boulevard would open back to usual vehicular traffic. In addition, one of the nodes that we have identified for private development site does have a limitation of when it could be developed. At the location at the southeast corner, of McLean and Douglas, shown on the map here, has a limitation on commercial and retail development for a period of 10 years after the closing of the private development site, unless otherwise approved by the city. So they have to come back to the city with a proposed type of development for that area. I'm sorry. The other thing they could do is, if they didn't want to do a private development on there, they could propose a private amusement development to be used for the public as well. In consideration of the less than anticipated adjacent property that would be available for development, this goes back to the original stadium discussion. If you remember back to that original picture of Lawrence Dumont, which was a much smaller site for the stadium, it had much more available land for private development. Once the decision by the Oversight Committee, which is comprised of team and the city talking about the stadium layout, instead of what we anticipated as 7 to 9 acres of private development site, we ended up with about 4.5. In honoring our agreement and discussion with the team, we identified additional property that could be available for development if they so choose. The site that we're proposing is the southwest corner of Waco and First Street, adjacent to the river and just north of the Drury Plaza Hotel. It's about 2.63 acres. And then what we're saying is they have a 10-year option to explore if they want to purchase and develop that site. They may exercise that option at any time after they're purchasing the private development sites, which is across the original stuff around the stadium. And then they can control that option for the first 5 years at no cost, but after the first 5 years, they want to continue to control that option, they'll have to pay us $25,000 a year. And if they so choose to develop, let me go back, I'm a little bit ahead of my comments here, that has to be consistent with the Downtown Catalyst Site Plan 2, which anticipates mixed-use development on that area. If they choose to actually go ahead and exercise that option and purchase the site, they will make 6 installments to repay that over the course of the first year. So the first payment would not happen until the first anniversary of their exercising their option. The purchase price for that option property depends on what occurs on the McLean site. So that southeast corner of Douglas McLean, depending on what type of development occurs at that, it will determine the pricing of the Waco and First Street site. If there is a private amenity on that Douglas and McLean site, then the purchase price is $1.5 million. If there is private development on that site, then the price is $1 million. Lastly, the developer and any entity that brings to the project will agree that they will not protest the amount of taxes or tax valuation regarding the private development, so long as the TIF bonds or CID or any other outstanding STAR bonds or debt service on the stadium and surrounding area remains. And prior to commencement of any phase, the city shall pay, construct, and deliver water, sewer, and stormwater utilities to the public rights of way to adequately support development. So having said all that, in our discussions with the development team, they wanted to share their vision for the waterfront. So as you see in the background is the stadium. As you see in the foreground, you see riverfront development. You'll see access down to the river with an enhanced seawall or riverfront edge with boardwalk. You'll see down on, this would be the south end towards Maple. You'll see on the water's edge, you'll see commercial development. Across from that is the NBC and team offices, and then just south of that where you see some bushes and trees, that's also a future development site. As you move to the north, you'll see a potential private amenity that they've talked about is, I just went blank, a Ferris wheel, sorry, for that private development area. So as you see, their vision for this entertainment district and how people are spilling out pre and post event is what they envision this unique destination. And their goal is not simply to fill it up with, so I'll say typical retail, but how do we create an environment that brings entertainment opportunities, unique destination retail development to the area. So lastly, we want to talk a little about the return on investment. As you'll see here in the chart, between the city's commitment, between the city and between the team's commitment within the stadium with the naming rights and management fee, you'll see in the far right two-hand columns with that a total over 20 years, as well as the Star Bond, TIF, and CID generation over the life of those either TIF or CID periods of time. All combined, the team and the team's private development group will generate upwards of $38 million in revenue to the city. That $38 million equates to roughly 50% of the stadium's $75 million stadium debt cost. So in consideration of that financial commitment that they have done, as well as their commitment to the design standards and efforts and timings, staff believes this is a favorable agreement for the city to consider. Understanding that we had technical difficulties over the weekend with our online service so people could read the reports and read through all the details, staff recommendation today is this is simply an information-only discussion, and that we would return on March 19th for consideration of the City Council. This would allow not only the council to continue to have discussions, but as well as the public to have time to read and discuss. Staff will stand for any questions.
Any questions at this point? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Just as we did with River Vista a few years ago to ensure that the public still had full access to the river and we're selling this property as well, can you explain to everyone how the public will never lose access to the river?
If I can go back to this picture. Just for a minute, if we look at this picture, you'll see between the Ferris wheel on the north end and the commercial development on the south end, you'll see access down to the river. And then if we go back, it's going to take me a few seconds to get back to the. I apologize, we're just. So if you look at the 4 development sites here, and you'll see in the middle there's this future Texas alignment that goes over to McLean. That area between the red dot on the north end and the red dot towards the south end, that'll be maintained for access to the riverfront. And as you know, in our Star Bond application, we've identified riverfront enhancements, and we definitely want the public to come down to the riverfront, as well as we know in the future we'll be talking about a pedestrian bridge that brings people from the East Bank, wherever that location is on the future C2 Performing Arts area, over to the West Bank, landing about that Texas Avenue location. And again, it's how do we pull people from both sides of the river to get down to the river to use it as a venue.
Thank you. That certainly is helpful. Any other questions? Seeing no other questions at this point, we'll go out to the public. Would anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Just ask you, share your name and trying to stay on the agenda item.
Myron Ackerman, I'm a private political consultant. I'm glad that you're taking no action today other than to postpone this, because there has been very little time to analyze and consider all the ramifications. As a taxpayer and as a researcher, I'm not sure 2 weeks without any public meetings is adequate. There's a great deal of information here, and I would like to see the city have at least one open meeting where people can bring their questions, get more information. As it is, a person will have to do their research, come before the board in 2 weeks, and not perhaps have questions answered by staff, but perhaps not have questions fully answered. I think a longer postponement might be beneficial, but I think definitely there should be a public meeting where the people can see all of this and ask questions. That's all I need for my time. If there's any questions, I just think we need to wait and make sure people have an opportunity to fully study a marvelous plan. But there are some things that I would question, and basically I've had 2 days to figure it out. So I would thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one question for you. So you were saying a public hearing would be nice. Would a social media hearing work for you, or are you thinking in person?
I think well publicized, it would be adequate as long as it would be interactive with the applicable staff, because there's going to be questions I have about various aspects. And social media, I do a lot of work. I would favor a personal meeting rather than electronic, simply because I think it's more open. People can feed off of ideas, and it generates questions. I think a digital could easily get out of control, and people wouldn't have the combined thinking of a group. It would be individuals. So my thought would be postpone it until each of the district advisory boards has met, and have a presentation at each advisory board. I know that's asking a bit, but with the project of this size and complexity, that would be my preference. That the advisory boards are better attended. They're a smaller audience, so there would be less of a lengthy meeting. And that would be my suggestion, because I think if a person's not active with their district advisory board, are they really interested in what the city's doing? So that would be an excellent suggestion if you would wait until there have been all the DABs. But all of that's up to you. I just think that we need more time.
Councilmember Claycomb, did you
Yes, I have a question. Would you be willing to provide us with the questions that you have?
Right now?
No, not right now, but
yes.
after this meeting. Yeah, would you give us that list of questions that you have? That would help me
Certainly.
understand what it is that you're...
Yeah, I can email the council. As I say, my first inclination of this was Sunday's article in the Eagle. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And then the final packet wasn't posted until 4:06 yesterday.
Yeah, we had technical difficulties.
So it's kind of like, yeah, I need more time, and yeah, I would be glad to provide those questions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other speakers?
Mayor, City Council, Jack Kellogg, proprietor of Hatman Jack's on West Douglas. Longtime Delano business owner since 1980. This is about the most exciting thing that could happen to Delano since the running of the Doves in the 1870s. And I really want to thank you and commend you for all your hard work. I know this is a huge project, and thanks for sticking with it. A couple of issues that I would like to discuss, and it's generally a parking situation. In this case, a few things I'd like to share. I did read the private development agreement and found it lacking for information of the kind that I needed. There seemed to be nothing in the private development agreement that will ensure that the Delano businesses will have any access to ground level parking in the development area. Specifically, I'm referring to Article 8, Section 8.01, titled Parking. Just to give you an idea of the parking situation in Delano, and let me be upfront about this, it's not sour grapes that I would refuse, as many business owners would never refuse, to make a contribution and have things that aren't necessarily perfect. But to give you an idea of the 600 block of West Douglas, in terms of parking alone, we have 15 businesses within that 600 block of West Douglas, and available street parking is 17 spaces. We all stage our businesses, particularly the 500 and 600 block of West Douglas, out of the northwest corner of Lawrence Dumont Stadium. I understand what you need. I understand you need 65,000 square feet of retail space. I understand the needs of the development and take them very seriously. As I say, I would love to see this thing happen, but that provision in the private development agreement does absolutely nothing to address an option that we may or may not have to stage our businesses in one way or another, whether it's our employees parking, who are certainly not going to park on the street. You know, Delano businesses over the years, and of course since 1980 I've been there, have been willing to make many sacrifices. In 2000, 2001, when the Delano revitalization plan came along, there were infrastructure improvements that were sadly needed. The city came through, this council chambers voted to approve nearly between $8 and $10 million for the revitalization plan. It put up a couple of beautiful amenities, a clock tower, wonderful bump outs, landscaping, etc., that has helped to make Delano a statewide destination. Thank you for that. That was a sacrifice in terms of parking. I personally, my business, lost 6 spaces through that alone. Was it a contribution that needed to be made? Yes. Do people in Wichita need to make contributions that they necessarily are not always in their best interests? Yes. However, this parking situation, and I understand you're not voting on this today, but the parking situation, and particularly that provision in this agreement, needs to be addressed, in my opinion. Sorry. The specific portion of that development agreement regarding parking as stated will be a detriment to Delano stakeholders who have been there for many, many years, and their ability to carry out our business on a daily basis. I would like to see this ballpark and the accompanying development plan work in Delano, and I thank you for all your efforts. However, this current parking plan, I believe, needs to be addressed. Any questions?
Any questions for Jack? Councilmember Playground.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, thank you.
No, I have a question.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I have
Oh,
a
goody.
question. So, and this may be just getting into the weeds.
Yeah.
But I still want to ask it. So, my understanding is in Delano, there's been a push for central business district zoning.
That's correct.
Okay. With central business zoning, what you're agreeing to is no parking minimums.
I understand that.
And so so that seems like a real,
Well, it's true, and that's what compounds our problem, actually.
Right.
Because it does remove restrictions on parking and parking minimums for places like restaurants and of that nature. And you're so right, and that's going to do nothing but compound the problem, in my opinion. Now, we've got to be able to take care of the people who put Delano on the map by providing or ensuring that we have places to go to stage our business. Thanks for bringing up CBD, because that's a real critical factor to how it is that we'll be able to operate.
but then there's trade-offs with parking because of that.
There certainly are. And, but I also think that that's what makes it most critical to us, to have an alternative. Now, I'm talking about the 500 and 600 block. You've got restaurants that need parking close by that will not be provided along Douglas Avenue. It's not just about me, but let's talk about me for a minute. I have customers who bring horse trailers from all over Kansas to be serviced, to have services done in my hat shop. I don't know where they're going to go. They're certainly not going to get on a trolley and find their way to Hatman Jack's with 2 boxes of hats with a 5-inch brim. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So please look at this parking plan and let's make it work. This can be a great deal. Let's just make this work.
Yeah, well, and as the mayor stated before,
Yeah.
that we're not done with parking. I mean, we do have to figure that out, so.
I understand, and, just to be fair, I've been told more than once by various people, Jack, don't worry about it. Jack, it's going to be fine. Well, according to the text, it might not be fine. So I ask you to take a close look at that, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Christopher Parasho, Delano resident. I kind of echo the comments by the first speaker as far as pushing this out a little bit to get some more public input and commentary. I know that Delano United has helped facilitate a couple of events already for commentary with regard to both the baseball stadium and the revitalization plan. I know we would be happy to do that again to try and get more public input on this. This last minute push and urgency to get things done does not help the perception with regard to the problems such as parking. We need to flesh these things out and have people have an opportunity to speak and to ask questions. There are questions just in the last 24, 48 hours since this first broke in the news that have come up that need to be addressed. Is this land WPA land? Is there restrictions to this land as to what can be done? Why does it have to actually be sold? Why couldn't it be leased? Why are we selling it for such a small amount when this city is struggling to fund things it needs? This project, if it's done the way you guys envision it, is going to rely heavily on the transportation system. Why not try and make enough money off this land, sale or lease, to help supplement some of the additional extra costs that transit is going to have to add capacity to help get people to this facility? Those are the kinds of things that a lot of people are asking, and they're not getting any answers other than, we'll take care of it. Trust us. Sorry, it's not working out that way. Any questions?
Any questions for the speaker? None, thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. I'm Wayne Bryan with Music Theater Wichita. We're very excited at all of the emphasis in creating excitement downtown. We think that's terrific, and we're all for it. The Sunday article in the Eagle on March 3rd surprised us with the mention that Century 2 was within the boundary of the CID area. And as I understand it, all the businesses within that prescribed area would get a 2% sales tax raise, monies for which would go to the Ball Stadium. I went to the packet at the City Council meeting today, and that is how the map was drawn, but there may be more discussion about this coming, and I just wanted to voice my hope that if taxes are raised over on the performing arts side, that they'll go towards something that will be headed toward performing arts and conventions. That's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, so to address that concern, there's no desire to place a CID that would raise money there to spend for the ballpark.
Thank you so much.
Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Todd Ramsey. I'm a downtown resident and business owner. I have a couple of questions that I would like. I don't know if we can have a dialogue in this format, but I just have a couple of questions. Number one, how long is the team contracted to play in the stadium, not just manage the stadium? Number two, 1/4 of the project is being financed by GOBs. I don't recall that being part of the conversation originally. Has that always been a part of the discussion? Number three, you're estimating that 2,433 visitors per day, every single day of the year, will be down in the district. I'm curious where those numbers come from, and if the $38 million that you're projecting from the district is from that estimate. And if that number is not met, how will that negatively affect our ability to pay back the bonds? Number four, what specific minor league regulation kept you from being able to discuss this with the public in advance of today's meeting? And number five, there was a slide that said the district would generate $38 million, or roughly 50% of the stadium construction. What was the time frame for that amount to be returned? It looked like it was 20 years, but surely we're gonna make more than $38 million over 20 years, right? That's only 50% of the construction. So those are the questions that I have. Thanks.
Yeah, the 38 million, Todd, was just on the 24 acres that was noted between the ballpark itself and the 4 acres of development. And that's where the 38 million comes from. And if you want to email your questions in, we will see if we can't find answers for all of those. Some of it may require us just to simply sit down. When we start talking about the restrictions that minor league baseball puts on entities that want to negotiate with teams, that's kind of a long list of how you go about negotiating with a potential new baseball team. Typically, you have to get permission from minor league baseball to even have any discussion, period. You can only discuss anything with one team at a time, and you can't bounce back and forth between multiple teams. So once you're in discussions with a team, you're finished with that team, then you seek permission from baseball to go have a conversation with another team, and it gets relatively complicated, and we could spend an hour talking about all of those nuances, but happy if you would email your questions, we'll get you some answers.
In conclusion, I think what we're looking for as citizens of the city is leadership. And I value that you haven't constantly surveyed the community on this topic, that you have a vision for what you want. But what is accomplished is the way that it is accomplished is equally as important to our perception of the city. So if we have an incredible facility, but the way that we get there is not transparent, is not done with openness and feeling like we have input as citizens, then our feelings about the final product will not be positively impacted. So we're looking to you. We hope that there can be an increase in transparency and that there can be an increase in the way that we're finding information about this. So thank you for delaying the vote. I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Paul Lavender, thank you for having me today. The last time that I addressed the council as a whole was via email on November 7th, 2017, the morning of a critical conversation around the future of Century 2. In that email, I pleaded that we as citizens wanted to follow leaders who cast vision, leaders who lead. I went on to say, I strongly believe that the decision made on this building is an accurate microcosm of who we are and who we strive to be as a community. I strongly believe that if you cast the vision and give us something to rally behind, we will. I will be the first one there standing, waving the flag. The community is watching, and future generations will remember the answer to the question being asked, who do we want to be? That was originally written about Century 2, but I believe it equally applies to the issue at hand today. Who do we want to be as a community, and how do you, as a council, intend to lead us into the future? Is the relationship you desire to have with the citizens one of trust and respect, where we are treated as partners and stakeholders, or one of manipulation and deceit? It is hard for me to put into words my frustration, discontent, and disappointment about how the issues of Century 2 and the ballpark development have been handled over the past 7 days. It feels to me as if the citizens and community have either been deliberately left out of the decision-making process or, when involved, have been completely ignored. Not long after my original email, a private group of business leaders, hand-selected by the mayor, was commissioned to study Century 2 and the performing arts in our community. They spent a year analyzing the issue and were then unceremoniously disbanded last week after delivering a unanimous recommendation on the future of performing arts in our community. After hearing this and speaking directly to members on that committee, I was frustrated. But that pales in comparison to what I'm feeling about the news surrounding baseball development from the past 48 hours. I do realize that I'm not privy to all the information that went into these decisions, but what has become apparent to me is that the decision on the ballpark and the land sale was made long ago, much earlier than previously led on, and certainly before the public was brought into the conversation. When asked about transparency and timing in the deal, Mayor Longwell, you were quoted as saying, "It just limits our opportunity to be as transparent as we would normally like to be." However, I believe this goes beyond a lack of transparency and into the realm of blatant disrespect for the citizens and the community the city council are charged with representing. So in that spirit of honesty and transparency, the questions that I have for the council is I would just like to understand, and I think the community deserves to understand, what was the process that went into this from start to finish? Who led it? Who was leading the discussions? And specifically, how did we make the decision to tear down Lawrence Dumont Stadium and start rebuilding another one without a signed deal in place? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll answer any questions.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, no questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker? Any other speakers? Going once?
Doug Ballard, 920 Buffum. I have several concerns that some of them have been already repeated. I'm a little concerned about some of the developments that have gone on prior to us getting to the stadium are a little dense to me, and I'm also a little concerned about all of the people that have businesses or live in property west of the stadium. How are they going to be impacted? Those that rent, is something going to happen to their rent? All those people look very vulnerable to me, especially the business owners like Jack, and as well as all the others that have stood the test of time. Are they going to get pushed out? And so I'm concerned about that. Another thing, as a baseball fan, big baseball fan, can't tell you the first time I was in Lawrence Stadium, but My dad took me to affiliated baseball since I was probably 5 years old. The relationship with the stadium and the team changed quite often. As I remember, maybe the Braves we probably held on to the longest, and we had a lot of relationships with professional teams when we were a AAA franchise. It only lasted just a very, very few years. So we're building a pretty nice park, and I'm not sure, that just makes me a little nervous. If something happens to the Marlins, will somebody else take their place? Their management has been, as far as baseball goes, a little questionable anyway compared to some of the other teams. So anyway, those are some of my concerns. So thank you.
Thank you. So no other speakers? Seeing no other speakers, we'll bring the discussion back to the bench. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, I had two things, if you could. We had two speakers bring up one, kind of why we tore down Lawrence Dumont Stadium. Could we speak to the state of it and the repairs that were necessary and maybe why that actually happened?
Sure. When we did the analysis of let me back up. We knew in order to attract affiliated baseball back to Wichita, there were certain requirements that minor league baseball has on the type of facility. And when we did our assessment of Lawrence Dumont Stadium, we had an independent group assess it and what it would cost to renovate to bring it up to that scale. It just simply wasn't feasible. It didn't have the amenities that could even be enhanced to cover that, as well as just a serious state of deterioration of the facility. It would be far simpler for us to tear down and build a new versus to retrofit an aging, failing facility. So that was the decision to move forward with a new facility.
And it didn't have steel reinforcement in it.
Actually, no, not very much. We were out there during demolition, and the contractor and our own engineering group recognized how quickly it came down was because there was a very limited amount of rebar in it. It was an old WPA. I think the message was just pour more concrete to solve the problem. So,
Thanks, Scott. And then the last one, it was brought up about possibly finding ways to fund transit with selling the property for a higher cost. Wouldn't that $38 million in revenue kind of help us out in similar ways?
it would, and it's ongoing as well. It's not just 20 years and it stops as far as, now it stops for the TIF and for the CID, but it'll continue to generate revenue to the city over the life of the project, which is going to be far in excess of 20 years. What we often talk about is there's a one-time cash sale, and if you do a one-time cash sale, that's the last of that cash sale. The balance is always do you take a one-time cash sale of $1 or $1 million, or do you rather say, I'd rather have a value of a property that allows development to occur quicker, which means longer, ongoing, continuous type of revenue. And that was a decision that the city made. Is our benefit is how quickly can we get development in there, the right scale, the right minimum amount of square footage that generates the ongoing revenue to help pay off the stadium, as well as hopefully spin off more development adjacent to it.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, I have another question. There was a question about the difference between the $38 million that you showed and the $75 million. Can you elaborate on that for us just a little bit?
Sure. If we go back to, I just want to bring out, I think the gentleman asked the question over the life of the $38 million. That's based off the 20 years for star bonds, 15 years for TIF, 22 years for a CID, and then our agreement with the team is for 20 years. So you see the management fee for 20 years. Actually, we have additional option terms for the team, so that could continue onwards. We also, and I think Councilwoman, you brought this up when we discussed the facility management agreement, is the $350 Does it go up with CPI? And it does. So we just put a straight line 350 in there. We know there's going to be CPI growth in there because you made it clear to us it can't go down. So we made it clear that it can only go up. So that's the minimum we're expecting for the management fee, and hopefully additional 5-year agreements with that. I will make it clear, there was a question about Miami Marlins. Minor League Baseball is interesting. Team relationships with minor league baseball changes over the years. You may be a Marlins franchise this year and for the next couple of years, but franchise agreements change periodically over a year. We may be down the line, a different team down the line. The commitment we made in the minor league baseball, not just PCL, but minor league baseball made in our facility management agreement was, this will be a AAA team location, regardless of whether it's this ownership or some future ownership, whether it's Pacific Coast League or Independent League, it'll always be a AAA location. So that was a key factor for us do we make this commitment for this type of facility?
Thank you.
Councilmember Fry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a follow-up while we're on this slide, this only pertains to the developable property that's in this agreement.
Correct.
It doesn't include the financing that would come to us from other property that gets developed in the area.
Correct.
Correct?
I didn't bring it, the actual TIF district goes up to Douglas and then goes down Douglas to Seneca between, my mind just draws blank, this road.
It includes the railroad tracks for that, so that we can do the improvements.
Yeah. So the TIF district's much larger than just the stadium site itself.
And again, so the star bond that's on the east side of the river is not included in this.
Yes, this is just star bond money that would be generated by that minimum 65,000 square feet of commercial retail.
So there's additional development dollars that will come to this project beyond just the acreage that we're talking now.
Correct. This is strictly, really, at the end of the day, the 4.5 acres that we talk about today.
And to that end, Mr. Bryan had the question earlier, and the mayor alluded to it. I also brought it up Friday at agenda review about the CID overlay. And it's not removed from this document yet, but we're only talking about the potential for a CID on the West Bank pertaining to this development agreement. We have not established those parameters yet.
Yeah, we're still working on the parameters, what the CID district would be. The key factor in this agreement, as well as the facility management agreement that we talked about briefly, is the team and the development arm of the team have committed to pay a CID. Whatever the final boundaries are, we know at the very least the stadium and the ancillary 4.5 acres worth of development will be in a CID.
And lastly, the option property at First and Waco, that revenue is not included in these numbers either. And there's no incentive being asked to develop that property. And it's only if the other phases of the stadium site is complete, correct?
Correct. They have to come back. If they wanted to exercise before the 10 years, they have to come back and make that request. It's up to the council to make that determination. If there's a private development on that corner, a private amenity, there's different rights. If it's public amenity or public development, you're right. That purchase sale value would come back to help offset that. Any additional incentives they want potentially for that site, they would have to go through the regular process.
But any property tax and sales tax is not being realized in this ROI right here.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just one more comment for the audience, and I think you alluded to this, Scott. So the Delano Neighborhood Plan and the Ballpark Village Master Plan have been out on our website now for maybe a month, 5 weeks, something like that.
I will
Okay,
defer to you.
well, and I would encourage folks to go and look at that because it shows at least the beginnings of the design guidelines as we move forward. They haven't been agreed to, but we are taking public comment on those right now.
We have heard back from the team and the team's development arm that they are supportive of the Ballpark Village Master Plan, which is pretty unique for Wichita. It's definitely a higher level of standard than what we've seen generally across the city.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just got one.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Just got one quick question. Heard some comments about why don't we lease the property versus sell the property? If we leased it, it would not be on the tax rolls. Is that correct?
I'm going to defer to our legal counsel.
You got 3 of them, 4 of them. We got 4 lawyers here, somebody knows the answer.
So it gets complicated.
Yeah.
You can do it taxes in lieu of.
Yeah, they do it.
It gets relatively complicated. The clean way to do it is sell it and put it on the tax rolls.
The challenge, Vice Mayor, as you know, leased property brings challenges for development arm to try and go get financing for the development. You'd have to do generally you'd have to do a longer type of lease in order to have comfort from a mortgage or a lending agency to do the type of investment and type of development we're envisioning for this property. So it may be a challenge for development arm to go get the type of funding they need to do the development to the level we're expecting, knowing it's on lease property versus fee simple property.
So if we do sell it, is there anything in all these agreements that's gonna make it property tax exempt?
Since it's in a TIF, it can't be property tax
can't.
exempt, yeah.
It has to be on the
It has to be on tax roll.
Okay.
If I can also add to Scott's, just put a finer point on Scott's issue about the lease versus sale. If you do the lease, as he said, you're gonna have longer term for that lease agreement, we would not be able then to have the aggressive time frame that we have for the development for the 60,000 square feet or 65,000 square feet of development, because they'd really have a difficult time meeting that schedule on a lease.
Councilmember Clendenin.
Scott, thanks so much. We're talking about property and selling it versus leasing it, and one of the biggest issues that I've had with constituents of mine are definitely that fact. We don't have oceanfront property, but we definitely have riverfront property, and this is prime, the biggest, most prime property in the city of Wichita. As we go through this owner's agreement, I know that we have the option, if the developer doesn't develop, to buy back. That still leaves us on the hook for finding a developer or developing it ourselves. Are there any personal guarantees with the developer that will guarantee, we're entering this contract with them? Are we having any personal guarantee from the partners that are buying it that will help us develop that property?
Mayor, Councilmember Clendenin, a personal guarantee per se, no. But what they've committed in the agreement is performance. So the stadium opens, let's just say April 1st of next year. They have 90 days to determine whether they go forward or not. If they do not, then we retain the property. If they do, then they have to perform within a certain amount of time, 12 months. If they fail to start construction within 12 months, we have a reverter clause that allows us to buy back the property for the same price that we sold it for.
Absolutely agree with that, but then we stall the development and the riverfront development. MILB, Pacific Coast League, predicated their being here based on that development. So if that development doesn't happen, does MILB, Pacific Coast League pull out? Do we have any sorts of personal guarantees that if that happens, that we can be made whole, or that we can guarantee that the development moves forward? Because we will then have to invest our own dollars potentially.
Well,
and
as far as personal guarantee, no, per se. What we would do, though, is become very aggressive of finding the next developer to agree to the same type of development timelines in order to justify the amount of revenue generation that we need to pay off that debt. So our push would be as quickly as possible to either sever our relationship with the development arm and take the property back, and then immediately turn around and seek new development relationships that would then agree to the same type of aggressive timelines. The goal would be then to get the revenue coming back in that we anticipated. But at the end of the day, and the city manager can correct me at the end of the day, the city has the ultimate responsibility to pay off the debt of its own city facility, which is the stadium.
Well, I know we're moving at lightning speed, and I think it is, I agree with the mayor. I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate because it's caused us to move so quick. Even we are seeing this agreement just a week ago, and we're trying to decipher it, and so I understand the public's frustration. Just wanted to make sure that as we move forward that, we have some mechanism in place to make sure that this happens for the unthinkable. So, thank you.
And that's where the performance portion of that contract comes into play. And we think it'll work very well. Any other comments? I don't know that I have any other questions. Scott, thank you for the presentation. I know that Councilmember Fry shared some remarks on air this morning that captured much of this and did a nice job with your remarks on air, Councilmember Fry. And this certainly is something that we've been working on for a very long time. If you want the timeline of all of the details of how this was initiated, this started almost 3.5 years ago when we were approached by a potential team that wanted to come to Wichita, and it piqued our interest. And we started out, as Scott Rigby shared, of just simply looking at the old stadium to see if we could do a major modification. And every time that we tried to enhance the stadium in some way structurally, they'd come back and say, you can't do that. The structure itself won't hold that. There's no way to keep that structure. And then the stadium itself was reaching the point where we were going to have to put several $1 million in it, not to enhance it, just to keep the concrete from spalling and falling on people. And it would literally be throwing money away. And so we knew at some point in time, very quickly, we were going to have the discussion that that stadium may not be able to hold another year of baseball, period, just because of all the safety concerns that involved. And so there was multiple looks at the old stadium to see if we could save it and renovate it and find the financing. And what led us down this long path was we initially looked at opportunities for revenue streams that we could come up with, and the reality is we didn't have the revenue to come up with an opportunity to bring a baseball team to the city. As we continued to work through that opportunity to potentially activate the core in our river corridor, that's when we reached out to our partners at the state, and they said, yeah, you could use STAR bonds for this project if it was done right. And that was a long, lengthy process to get STAR bonds, but the STAR bond portion of this is the only thing that provides the revenue stream that allows us to build this, because we weren't going to build it just out of the city coffers. The beauty of that is STAR bonds don't add any additional tax burden at all onto the citizens of this city. In fact, STAR bonds themselves don't even add an additional sales tax. It just simply collects the sales tax that will be collected regardless of what's there. And instead of delivering that sales tax to the state, it gets delivered to pay off the bonds for this project. And so that's what enabled us to find the revenue stream. Now, once we found that revenue stream, we went back to the team that approached us and said, we're looking for a new home, and unfortunately, they had already signed a deal with another city. And so we lost that team. And that's when we decided to take a different action, and we put out an RFP and asked for a headhunter to get involved, and we had 2 of them that applied, and we chose Beacon Sports. And Beacon Sports then was acting on our behalf to go find a baseball team. Initially, Beacon Sports made all of the first contacts, and it's a complicated process, as I said before, for how you can interact with a team and the appropriate protocol and the permissions that you have to get from both minor league and Major League Baseball. And that's eventually what led us to this path that we're on today. And then once you begin negotiating with a team, it's not done openly, unfortunately. Negotiations are done privately for a wide variety of reasons. And so I understand the frustration, and I appreciate staff bringing this forward today with ultimately the recommendation that we defer it for 2 weeks and allow more transparency than we've been able to provide. As you've heard from many in this room even today, they're excited about the project. It's going to change the dynamics of our city. I understand that 50 years ago we tried AAA baseball. We're a different city today than we were 50 years ago. And certainly if you look at the excitement that we have, from keeping Cargill to Union Station to Spaghetti Warehouse to Hilton Garden Inn to Douglas Place to the River Corridor to the excitement in Delano, we're a different city today than we were 50 years ago. 50 years ago, Dave Burke only dreamt of building something awesome in Old Town. He was only 40 then. He was just getting started. So we're a far different city today than we were 50 years ago. And I love the momentum that we have. One of the things that we kind of glossed over, if you want to do a comparison, for the past 10 years, we've been getting $25,000 annual revenue off of the old stadium in terms of a management fee. Between the management fee and the naming rights, we're going to receive $600,000 a year. It's $12 million just over the first 20 years. Far different than the $25,000 a year we've been getting off the existing stadium for the last 10 years. And when we talk about the revenue that this is going to generate, we've already sat down and had some preliminary discussions with some other development that's proposed around here. We know by looking at all of the proposed development that we believe will happen, that revenue stream is going to be maybe 3 times as much as what you see on the screen right now. 3 times as much. And it's not just for 20 years, it goes on in perpetuity. So it provides a great opportunity for us to grow our tax base without taxing individuals more. And that's what I've always been advocating. We can't continue just to raise taxes or promote higher taxes or tell people to foot more of the bill. We have to grow our community if we want the kinds of amenities that young people today demand to have. It's going to require us to do some bold things that will help us not only keep our young people here, and we're seeing that trend change, by the way. When you look at net migration, something that I found that I was pretty proud of, when you look at net migration, we're still struggling with net migration out, but it's not the 20 to 24-year-olds anymore. We actually grew the 20 to 24-year-olds in Wichita. We've reversed that trend of them wanting to leave our city. And much of it is because of the momentum that we have in our city. So I am looking forward to furthering the discussion. Certainly we have a council that's been working on this for a long time. I get the frustration of the transparency. We're happy to see if we can't address all of those concerns to ensure that the public has a complete understanding of where we're going, because there's been too much misinformation that's been out there. I know several media outlets keep saying that it's a transfer of 24 acres, 24 acres, 24 acres. It's 4 acres. It's not 24 acres, it's 4 acres. And some said that we are giving up the entire river corridor. We're not giving up the river corridor. In fact, the river corridor will remain part of the public access in perpetuity. It's going to be a great community asset, great gathering place. I will tell you, you don't see a lot of people gathering down there today. I mean, it certainly hasn't been a place that has drawn a lot of people to it, but it will when all of these new assets are developed. So thank you for the hard work. Thank you to the community that's excited about this. And thank you to staff that's worked on this for a long time. And I would move that we defer this for 2 weeks.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to defer. Any other questions? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Ordinance amendments to Title IV of the Code of Wichita pertaining to regulation of cereal malt beverages, adopting state law allowing cereal malt beverage licensees to sell beer containing not more than 6% alcohol by volume.
Nobody wants to stay and talk about beer?
I was why say that? Really?
We're talking about beer, folks.
I know.
I think it's natural after talking about baseball that we're now going to talk about beer.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Beth Harlensky from the Law Department, and before you is a proposed ordinance amendment to Title IV of the City Code, and the majority of the proposed changes are to Chapter 4.12 of the code, which deals with cereal malt beverages. As you're aware, the state of Kansas still recognizes two types of intoxicating beverages, both cereal malt beverage, or CMB, and alcoholic liquor. For the most part, CMB is licensed and regulated locally, and there are a few overarching state statutes that are involved, and that brings us here today. CMB sales are allowed by cereal malt beverage retailers who are primarily grocery stores, gas stations, convenience stores, drug stores, and restaurants, and establishments that we currently refer to as taverns. And CMB is a fermented beverage that contains not more than 3.2% alcohol by weight that is made from malt, which is where it gets its name. And the background for the proposed changes to the city code that are before you today is a bill that was passed by the Kansas legislature back in 2017, but it does not become effective until April 1st of 2019. And this bill amends one of the state laws that affects CMB to allow CMB licensees to also sell beer that is no more than 6% alcohol by volume. And in order to allow CMB licensees, in the city of Wichita to engage in this expanded sale that is authorized by the state, it's necessary to amend our local code. And along with this amendment, since the city's ordinances regulating CMB hadn't really been reviewed for some time, some additional changes are proposed and included to update our code and make it mere state law. Amendments to our general alcohol code found in 4.04 are also necessary to allow the sale of 6% beer on certain park property. There are currently 5 municipal golf courses and 2 city parks that are licensed to sell CMB and could sell 6% beer with the expanded sales that are authorized by state law. And state law generally prohibits the consumption of alcoholic liquor on public property. However, the same law allows exemptions properties to be exempted, by the governing body of a locality, but it must be done by ordinance. And because 6% beer is alcoholic liquor by definition, it will require that these properties be exempted to allow the consumption of that beer on that same property. So we've included those in the proposed amendments. And if the proposed changes are adopted, the sale of 6% beer will be allowed by any CMB retailer who currently possesses or who in the future obtains a license to sell CMB either on or off premises. And it also allows the sale of CMB in retail liquor stores. The state law change does not, however, I wanted to mention, it does not include the special event retailer's permit that is used for community events for the temporary sale of CMB. For some reason, this was not included by the legislature, but that is not in there. There are also changes to all relevant sections of Chapter 4.12 to incorporate the language allowing the sale of 6% beer. The additional changes that are proposed to update the city CMB code are specifically, we've changed the definition of retailer, which is amended to reflect the change made by the state. The outdated term tavern is eliminated from the city code. This term was eliminated from the state statutes many, many years ago, but the term, for some reason, remained a part of our code. And currently, there are only 3 licensed taverns in the city of Wichita, so it's kind of an outdated concept. Most establishments that sell alcoholic beverages are licensed as drinking establishments and can sell all types of alcoholic liquor. And then the terms on-premise and off-premise CMB licenses will be used to designate whether CMB and 6% beer is going to be sold for consumption on or off the licensed premises. And again, this mirrors the language of state statute. Along with, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Along with eliminating the term tavern, all distance requirements for taverns are removed from Chapter 4.12, since that term's been eliminated. The distance requirements, though, do remain in effect because they are also contained in our zoning code. And other regulations that apply to taverns under the current ordinance are maintained by requiring cereal malt beverage establishments selling cereal malt beverage to sell at least 30% food, to allow minors on the premises, or to be open on Sundays. Amendments are also, I'm sorry, I'm not getting this turned there. Amendments are also proposed to the application process, eliminating some provisions that are outdated by our electronic licensing approval system. Hours and days for the sale of CMB and retailers which would be selling 6% beer under this amendment would remain the same. And the provisions, there are slight changes made to the provisions that form the basis for the city council to suspend or revoke CMB licenses. They're really reorganized to reflect the current state statute. And I apologize. No?
That was it. 9 is what you're on. There you go.
I'm missing one. I'm missing a slide, it appears. But to return to the requirements to amend to affect the parks, as previously explained, section 4.04045 is our exemption ordinance, and it is amended to include the 5 municipal golf courses as well as Stryker Multi-Sport Complex and South Lakes Park, where CMB is currently sold. And this will allow the sale of 6% beer and also consumption of that beer that's sold on the property. And please note in the changes, this exemption extends only to the consumption of 6% beer. It is not extended to all alcoholic liquor. And this proposed change will be presented to the Park Board on March 11th at their monthly meeting for their approval, as some of that property is still under the jurisdiction and control of that board. And the Park Board's vote will be obtained prior to the second reading of this ordinance if you choose to approve that today. An additional change is also made to our exemption ordinance to acknowledge the demolition of Lawrence Dumont Stadium by referring to this property as the former Lawrence Dumont Stadium. And this will keep that property exempted until it is formally renamed in the next year. And expected outcomes of these changes: the city code regulating cereal malt beverage will include the expansion that was passed by the state that allows the sale of 6% beer by any establishment that is now licensed to sell CMB. Again, your grocery, convenience stores, drug stores, gas stations, restaurants. And Chapter 4.12 will mirror the language of state law, and some outdated terms and provisions have been eliminated. And with the approval of the Park Board, certain park properties will be able to engage in this expanded sale and consumption of 6% beer. And please keep in mind that all proposed amendments are scheduled to become effective April 1st of 2019 to coincide with state law changes. So, any questions?
I can't imagine. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you for that, Marianne. Beth, if you could back up to slide 4, I just want to be clear on the permitting for special events that currently, the second bullet point, state law change does not include the special events retailers permit use. So those groups that are now applying for a community event permit with the CMB, this will not affect any of that. They will not see any increase in permit fees or any other requirements. They'll be able to just continue as is, but just now be allowed to sell
Correct.
the higher alcohol.
Yes, it's not affected by that, and quite frankly, I didn't realize this until I started preparing the amendment, that it wasn't included, and I don't know what the state's, if it was just an oversight, or if there was some reason for that. I couldn't find anything in the legislative discussion.
There are some groups now that do the CMB for their special events, and I don't know if it's because of the lower permit fee versus an entertainment establishment or a TED. I get lost in some of these acronyms. But I just want to make sure that there's not going to be a cause and effect that they're going to have to pay higher fees or go through other hoops because of this change.
No.
Okay.
In fact, there are no change in the fees.
Okay.
Of any fees for any of these.
All right, thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah. Thank you, Vice Mayor. I did have one question since we're actually talking about it. Could you give me some history, if you have it, on why there is a 30% requirement for food for CMBs?
Why there is a 30%?
Yeah.
We just imposed that. Actually, the tavern definition imposed a 50%. The 30% is what we put in this ordinance because that's what we require for alcoholic liquor sales. That's, at one point, it was 50% for everything many years ago, and the council lowered it. The then seated council lowered it to 30%. So it's been back and forth between both of those.
So is the thinking that 30% food helps with sobering people up, or?
I think what the, and please keep in mind too, that the definition of a restaurant under the zoning code is 50%, so it's confusing. I think probably, as it's been explained to me, is if you don't sell at least 30% food, you're really just a place where people go to drink, as opposed to a restaurant where you go to order food and you get alcohol as a complement to the food. That would be my explanation.
Councilmember, this issue of 30% is going to come back to you. I think you're familiar with some of our entertainment venues that have talked about this being an impediment to them in terms of reaching their full audience or intended audience. So I've had had discussions with Councilmember Claycomb. I understand you've had some discussions as well. So we'll be bringing something, a process forward that'll have some involvement from the community and the council as we look at that issue this year.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Claycomb, I'll turn it over to you, but did you also work at helping with this? Was this one of those issues?
No, this isn't, but what Councilmember Johnson's talking about, the 30% food and some of that, we're working on that issue.
You're still working on that?
Yeah, we're still working on that issue. So I have a question about, I want to go back to the special events that Councilmember Fry asked about. So the way I read this is that the special events can only sell CMB.
That's correct.
Even though I think CMB, well, right now we still have it, but it may eventually go away.
You know, I don't personally have any knowledge of that. I have been told that certain distributors in town have said they're no longer going to carry it. I also understand that there's only one other state besides Kansas that still even has it. So it may not be something that the breweries can continue to make.
So we would have to wait, though, until the state changes that to change our ordinance?
Since the state still allows for CMB, but they've also allowed for this expanded sale, I think they'd be okay from this point. They could at least sell 6% beer, 6%. Which they're going to be able to get easily.
Yeah, why wouldn't we want to make that adjustment, knowing that, you know, what we refer to as the 3.2, we believe is not going to exist any longer. Why not go ahead and make that adjustment now for community events, special events?
I would have to look and see if we can do that under state statute since it wasn't expanded by the state.
Yeah, I think that's what
That's
Councilmember
what I'm-
Claycomb was
That's
asking.
this whole
what I-
discussion, yeah.
Yeah, could we do that? And so when
Well,
we get around to a motion or.
we already have it because 6% beer is alcoholic liquor, and they can purchase a temporary permit and sell 6% beer.
But then would that
So-
increase their fees?
Right.
It is a higher fee,
Yeah,
and it's
that's-
also a state license because the state regulates alcoholic liquor. So I'm
So I
sorry, I
think
misunderstood your
that's what we
question.
wanna-
Right.
I don't think we can do that without a change in the state because the state regulates alcoholic liquor.
Okay.
All right, so we are gonna have to wait on the state
Right.
then
Yeah,
for
it
that
sounds like we
portion,
will.
which we would think would come relatively soon. I don't know what the timeline is for the state to allow 6% beer sales in grocery stores.
April 1st.
April 1st.
So I
The
would-
state
I
law
would think-
takes effect then.
I would think everything else will start changing pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We haven't gone out to the public yet. Thank you. Anyone in the audience like to address the council on this agenda item? Again, we are talking about beer.
No, I'm thirsty.
We'll bring discussion back to the bench. Any further discussion at this point? I think we still have some questions that we would like for you to research, potentially what happens with state law. So if you can keep on top of that,
Yes.
to see what state law is eventually going to do with CMB and the permitting process. Because our concern is, we don't want to tack on additional fees just for them to be allowed to have beer sales at these special events. And if the only way to do that is go to, whatever we call it, the strong liquor laws, that's part of the concern we have.
I think to allow that, the state would have to pass a law putting regulation of 6% beer with the localities. And, I don't know if they'll do that or not because it's a tax issue and revenue issue.
So as we go forward with this, at least showing what those impacts may be with these changes for people that are doing CMBs and other licenses and how that may be affected would be good to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Place it on the first reading.
All right. So at this point, I would move that the city council place the ordinance on first reading and authorize all the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Ordinance relating to victims' rights in municipal court cases.
Good morning, Sharon Dickroff on behalf of the Law Department. Before you today are ordinances creating a new chapter for the city code to address victims' rights. As history, in 1989, the Kansas legislature adopted a state Bill of Rights, which requires that victims be treated respectfully, that they be notified of certain hearings, that they be allowed to address the court, and that appropriate restitution information be provided to them. In response to that legislation, the city in 1995 passed a resolution. Currently, that resolution is outdated because it references ordinances that no longer exist, and resolutions from a public standpoint are much more difficult to locate. The proposed amendments would codify the information in the prior resolution, would also update and specify the ordinance violations and hearing types where victims are to receive notification in municipal court. Again, it provides that victims are to be treated with respect and provided information regarding restitution. It also requires that staff that deal directly with victims have resources and complete education to deal with specific victim issues. And I would stand for any questions.
This is, seems like kind of a common sense thing, but always good to codify it. Any questions at this point?
Thank you.
We'll go out to the audience. Anybody like to address the council on this agenda item?
Hi, Catherine Camden. I live in District 1. Again, I know a lot of people made the comment that they didn't get the agenda till yesterday. I think I've made that request before. It's pretty much every week this happens. It's Monday, and there was a lot to review. I didn't see this till just this morning. My phone kind of pulled it up. Of course, I'm in favor of this, and like you said, it's kind of a no-brainer. I don't know why it hasn't already been updated after this many years. There's a few things in there that the ordinance, I think there's like 3 things that it updates, main specific things. It specifies in detail what the victims are, what a violation of an ordinance is, animal bites, driving under the influence, and then victims are things of that nature. But it also talks about respect, and it talks about training. There's areas in there where it says that city employees, chief of police, specifically it calls out him by name. People are going to have training and they're going to be respectful. I'm wondering if there's any kind of, do you know if there's going to be training that's already set up to do that specifically as far as domestic violence, victim rights, or people who've gotten bit by a dog? It also talks about offering people assistance and pushing them, offering them but assistance as far as different organizations that can help them with mental health or things that they may be suffering from as a victim. So do we know if we have any of those things set up yet, or plans to do that, or work with like Wichita Family Crisis Center or WASAC or anything?
So, are there any other questions? We'll try and address that.
No, it's mostly the training and the respect thing, because it says it's going to have talk about sensitivity in there. There's going to be sensitivity training for city staff and police and things like that, and also the social welfare recommendations and referrals, and then the specific training itself for victims, how to handle that sensitivity.
Okay, thank you. We'll see if staff can answer that now. If not, we'll get you the answer.
Regarding the first issue for resources to victims, both the police department have a victim advocate. Our prosecution office has 2 victim advocates that routinely will provide that type of information. Our office, as well as the police victim advocate, works closely with a number of shelters, nonprofits, to provide that kind of social service information. Regarding the training, our victim advocate staff will provide training during non-court week to court personnel. As part of the police curriculum, they do have victim information, training on domestic violence, training on a domestic violence lethality assessment, and they work in close concert with their in-house victim advocate as well.
Okay. I think I've also seen our neighborhood resource officers that are out there in the community provide direction for some of these different types of resources. If someone walks into a neighborhood center and says, I'm looking for help with, and I know I've seen some pamphlets that we have often in our neighborhood centers that address a wide variety of issues, including domestic violence and some of those other issues. And so you can find some of that information in our neighborhood centers. Is that correct?
I would believe we do have a pamphlet on domestic violence, specifically a very nice set of resources. I believe that may be what you're talking about in terms of victim information.
Well, and I've been to some events where there were a wide variety of other entities that could provide a wide variety of services, from mental health to domestic violence. And our neighborhood resources officers were handing those out. Do you have those in your neighborhood center?
I believe we do. We have big thing on the shelf full of pamphlets and everything. And then our community policing officers
So
tend to come in there as
Kathy,
well.
if you have more questions on the training, get with staff and we'll.
Yeah, I think, I understand that, and I know that the center does have information. I know police officers. I'll tell you, as a personal victim of domestic violence and having to be in a hospital and having police come out, that sensitivity training really maybe needs to be there more. My question was more like, since it's an ordinance now, if you do, I assume, update it, that ordinance requires that these things happen. So it's not just domestic violence. It's like a person gets bit by a dog. Is it going to be standard that people are referred on to assistance or to medical or whatnot? Or like in Sunny's case today, I mean, her 9-year-old was killed tragically. She's never received any sort of offer of, from the police or anything, go here for, she obviously is going to need mental therapy. I mean, she can't sleep as it is. Anybody who loses a son. And her son was a victim, she's a victim. And it protects, this ordinance protects family members of victims as well. So I just didn't know if it was going to be more of a across-the-board thing that's going to be incorporated, because I know we have training right now. I was just hoping to see it, that's maybe what the ordinance was saying, more like in any kind of victim situation, services are offered.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I would move that the city council place the ordinance on first reading and authorize all necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Water Walk 2019 Annual Community Event Application, Community Events with Alcohol Consumption Resolution.
Mayor, Council, John D'Angelo. What's before you today is the annual application for the Water Walk at 515 South. They do a series of events throughout the year, so they apply for and get an annual license so that they can do those in accordance with the community event application. Street closures approval for the February 26th included the South Water, Dewey, also for the Blocktoberfest, which will be October 4th and 5th of 2019. Area businesses have also been notified, so they're aware of these events that are going to be occurring and the dates. City code requires the authorization of a resolution, which includes the proposed TAD and the location. Staff has reviewed this, and this does meet the requirements. This is a list of those events for this coming year for 2019 that the Water Walk will be putting on events down in their locations that this license is intended to cover at this today. Here's the outline of the closure and how it affects the streets for the Friday night at the fountains and the food trucks at the fountains event. This is the concert series. As you can see, it's a different configuration that they put the stage in the street. And then the Blocktoberfest, which will occur in the fall, uses the property there in front of the Waltzing Waters. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Any questions for John? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Turn it over to Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a great event every year. I'd move that we take the staff's recommended action.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Quarterly financial report for the year ended December 31st, 2018.
Morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. Sean Henning, Director of Finance. The item before you this morning is the quarterly financial report for the year ended December 31st, 2018. This report provides you with an Unaudited activity for 2018, our external audit will likely be completed later in the spring, so we'll have audited results at that time. The report also provides comparisons to the revised budget as well as the prior year at December 31, and also gives us a look into as we move forward into 2019. Some of the key points that I'll cover during this presentation includes the report that most of the funds were consistent with the 2018 revised budget. The general fund did record a surplus, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And one of the major things that to report on some of the other funds relates to the golf fund as it continues to underperform. With respect to the general fund, on the revenue side of things, court fines were $1 million below the revised budget. That's consistent with prior years. In 2018, the revenues were actually $96,000 lower than what we recorded in 2017 and totaled $7.9 million. Charges for services were also $1 million below the revised budget, but did reflect an increase over the prior year. Property taxes were higher than what we anticipated by $1.1 million in comparison to the revised budget, and these revenues were up $2.6 million from the prior year. We believe that most of this increase is the result of residents or homeowners paying more in the current year, so we're experiencing fewer delinquencies, which is a good thing. Interest earnings were quite a bit higher than what we anticipated by about $2.4 million. Most of that is due to increased rates and favorable market conditions that we hope will continue on into 2019. And then also a contributor was local sales tax, which came in $500,000 higher than the revised budget and was nearly $1 million higher than what we reported this time last year. With respect to expenditures, they totaled $235.5 million and came in $2.4 million lower than the revised budget. Salaries represent the largest portion of our expenditures, and public safety also accounts for nearly 58% of the total general fund budget. Public safety expenditures were slightly below the revised budget by about $500,000, and all other spending was $1.9 million lower than what we anticipated with the revised budget. As a result of all of that activity, the general fund did recognize a reserve or a surplus of $2.5 million, and this excludes what we recorded as a special item for the transfer of the remaining Hyatt sale proceeds that were recorded in 2018. So the unencumbered fund balance for the general fund totaled $34.8 million, and that represents 14.8% of our expenditures and other uses for the current year. That's a slight increase in our percentage of expenditures as compared to last year. With respect to our bonded debt at the end of the year totaled $97.65 million. Of that, GO at large debt, which is payable from property tax, is represents only 5% of our total bonded debt, or $46 million. As you can see by taking a look at this chart, the largest portions of our debt are payable from revenue bonds, which are then repaid from user fees and ratepayers, as well as general obligation bonds that are repaid through enterprise funds. As I mentioned previously, GO at large debt is 5% of our total bonded debt. Overall, GO debt declined by nearly 37 million, and we issued 25.4 million in GO and special assessment bonds in 2018, and then had just regular principal retirement of outstanding bonds totaling just over 62 million. Overall, our total bonded debt fell by 63.6 million, and that's primarily due to retirement of GO bonded debt as well as revenue bonds. With respect to other funds, I'll just touch on a few things. Revenues of the water and sewer utilities were higher than the prior year, but were lower than the revised budget. And also, on the other side, water and sewer utility expenditures were also lower than the prior year and also lower than budgeted. With respect to the golf fund I mentioned a little bit earlier, revenues are below budget by $220,000 and fell 7.3% in comparison to last year. The number of rounds played declined 8.7%. The rounds played in 2018 totaled 138,000 versus nearly 152,000 in 2017. Expenditures were 98.5% of the revised budget and were also lower than the prior year. And staff will continue to monitor the financial position and activity of the golf fund throughout 2019. And at the end of the year, their unencumbered cash was around just around $90,000. So something that we'll continue monitoring. In summary, financial performance was consistent with or slightly better than the 2018 revised budget for most funds. Golf continues to be challenged, and the general fund projections should benefit from positive trends related to what we're seeing as increases in property tax, sales tax, and interest earnings. The recommendation, staff recommendation, is to receive and file the quarterly financial report for the period ending December 31st, 2018, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions you might have.
So I would just say you let that be the bar for all future quarterly financial reports.
It was a good year.
So it's nice to hear good news, and as we keep sharing, there's a lot of momentum in Wichita. That report helped quantify it. So it's nice to see. Yep.
Just real quick, so overall, I know it's unaudited, but right now you're projecting a surplus of 2.5 million.
Yes.
How does that get applied to this year, or have we already allowed for that in this budget? What do we do with that surplus, I guess?
So we still had some gaps that we have to fill.
Okay.
Yeah, we will, that balance will carry over into our beginning balance for 2019. And then as we prepare the 2019 revised budget, that will help us as we revise budget projections both on the revenue and expenditure side. So
I guess the takeaway is that it just doesn't mean we have another $2.5 million
No,
to spend.
it just helps
We've got
fill
it
the gap.
accounted for
Yes.
in other places. That's what I want people to hear.
yeah, because in 2019 and 2020, and based on the updates of our financial forecast, those funds should help us moving forward if we should experience any shortfalls.
Yeah, it's not like we found $2.5 million all of a sudden.
No.
So just want to make clear. Thank you.
And just a reminder, Moody's and Standard & Poor's do talk about their concerns on the percentage of expenditures represented by our fund balance, so we have to be careful.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clendon.
So I apologize if I didn't catch it, but from the numbers that I was seeing on the slide, both our overall bonded indebtedness and our GO debt has both gone down,
Yes.
and we're reducing that debt.
Yes. You know, and that can change over time as capital projects are completed. We do have standard bond issuances that we do every fall for special assessments and general obligation projects. We will also probably be taking a look at, in 2019, at the need to issue local sales tax bonds for freeway improvements, as well as water and sewer utility bonds based upon their cash and financing needs.
Well, I know that we're expecting our debt service to go down over the next few years and start trending downward. And so I just think it's worthy to note that we reduced our debt, and that's still the plan over the next decade or more. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience like to address the council on this agenda item? No one wants to share in our good news?
There you go.
Thank you.
We'll bring the discussion back to the bench. Move that we receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
DER 2018-00016, updates to the Wireless Communication Master Plan and the Unified Zoning Code regulations of wireless communication facilities.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. Scott Knable with the Metropolitan Area Planning Department to present this item. As with a couple of the prior items, we are bringing forward to you ordinance changes that bring our current local regulations in conformance with changes that have been made at the state and in this case the federal level. The statute 66-2019 was passed by the state of Kansas, and it significantly changed the way in which local units of government can regulate wireless communication facilities. Prior to this statute, the city of Wichita, in its ordinance, regulated wireless communication facilities by doing all of the things that are listed on this slide. We would ask that you demonstrate that you cannot locate your antennas on an existing tower. We would evaluate those merits in making that decision in whether or not to allow the construction of a new tower or other type of facility. And then we would require that if the city did grant a permit to build a new tower, that tower be designed and constructed such that other antennas could be placed on that tower. None of those options are available to us any longer with the adoption of this state statute, and so the item before you today would remove those requirements from both our wireless communication master plan and the implementation of it from the zoning ordinance. Additionally, and the reason that we're coming to you at this moment to do all of this, in October, the Federal Communication Commission issued a declaratory ruling that did several things. One, it expressly stated that small cell facilities must be permitted to be located in the right-of-way. The state statute that I mentioned previously also had done that, and our plan actually encourages the location of those types of facilities in our right-of-way and has for about 20 years. And it's just now coming to fruition that most of the new facilities are seeking to locate in the right-of-way rather than on private property. The FCC ruling stated that if you are to establish and enforce design standards for those small cell facilities when they're located in the right-of-way, they have to be published by, and I've got April 14th, 2019 on here. I think it is actually April 12th, 2019, so it's coming up very soon. This action, if you are to approve it, would meet that deadline. There's a couple other things in there that are changes. One, there's clarification about reviewing applications for completeness and what the city's options are. It gives us, in the FCC ruling, 10 days to make that review. And then the other real critical piece here is that there has been what's called a shot clock for review of wireless communication facilities in place for better part of 15 years now. But the FCC is clarifying that review process, which is for a new facility to be located on private property, is set at 150 days, that process includes not just the zoning approval for that facility, but also the building permit approval. And so one of the recommendations of the wireless plan is that we give applicants two options. One, that they file for both their zoning permit and their building permit concurrently, so that they submit the entire package, or they complete what's called a tolling agreement, which establishes that they're agreeing that if they only file the zoning application and not the building permit application, that the time between when the zoning approval is granted and when the building permit application is filed does not count towards this 150-day requirement, and they would be agreeing to that. And they would have the option of doing either one. They could submit that tolling agreement, or they could just submit and file for both permits at the same time. So as I mentioned, the draft plan removes all the requirements regarding co-location and what we call speculative facilities, and establishes design guidelines for facilities in the right-of-way, which is the biggest change to the master plan itself, other than changing the entire process of the way we review these things. And then one of the things that we've put in place, and this is something that applies not just to wireless facilities but to other applications as well, is allowing the governing body to modify supplementary use regulations. The way the code is written now, there's actually some authority granted to city staff that the governing body itself doesn't have, and so we're rectifying that situation so that as you approve a zoning application, you can grant waivers, if you so choose, to those supplementary use regulations. So this is the design guidelines that have been in place for quite some time. The tower on the right is what we discourage. The two towers on the middle and on the left is what we encourage, and these are what are called macro towers, large cellular facilities, generally 80 plus feet in height, some as tall as 150 or 200 feet tall. And then the right-of-way design guidelines, the things that we're establishing with this is that we provide that there be a ability of an adjoining property to the right-of-way to provide comment regarding the proposed facility's location and design, that the location itself of the facility in the right-of-way needs to be adjacent to common lot lines or open space, as opposed to right immediately in front of a building, particularly a residential structure. That any wiring that is associated with the facility needs to be in conduit or within the pole itself, as opposed to being exposed externally, which you can see on the previous slide what the external wiring on the item on the right does in terms of the appearance. It really blocks out some of that transparency that you might otherwise hide that facility. The antennas and equipment need to be concealed by a cover or an enclosure matching the design and color of the facility, and I'll show you an example of how that is done. The locations need to respect all of the public safety design criteria as it relates to sight lines and those sorts of things. The facility height is limited to no more than 10% taller than the existing poles that are in the right-of-way within that block. And then the poles themselves, what's recommended is that is the item on the right, there was a pole added to the right-of-way for the sole purpose of installing a wireless antenna and communication equipment. You can see on the left, there was an existing light pole that was replaced, and the antenna was added to the top. The equipment was attached to the side of it. One of the things that we would be looking for in this, one of the design changes is that even the item on the left there where the equipment color box does not match the pole. That would be something we would be looking for, is that those two colors coordinate, and then you can see there is no exposed wiring, and then the antenna itself is covered in an enclosure that matches the color and style of the pole. Those are the types of things that this plan will encourage going forward. So with that, recommended action is that you adopt the wireless master plan and the ordinance, zoning code ordinance that implements it. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions? Councilmember Claycomb.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. I have some questions. So where you were talking about we can only revise design guidelines up until April 14th, does that only apply to the small cell facilities?
It does apply only to the small cell facilities in the right-of-way. That is correct. The FCC ruling only deals with those
Okay.
types of facilities.
So if we had design standards that we wanted to revise that have to do with towers that go on private property, we can still adjust those over time?
That's correct. There are obviously limitations
Sure.
as to what we can do, but there is no requirement that those be published by that deadline.
Okay. And then what are those supplementary use regulations?
There's a number of them as it relates to wireless facilities. It is the primary piece of that is the setback requirement that at times it makes sense to locate a wireless facility that is, the setback is equivalent to the height of the facility itself. Sometimes in siting one of these, it makes a lot of sense to put it in a corner of a property that would not have very much setback from the adjoining properties, and that would be because the adjoining properties are open space, those sorts of things. And so it would allow, as it relates to wireless facilities, allow the council to grant that waiver.
Okay. So really the changes we made to this, they are for the small cell facilities?
In terms of the design guidelines, that's correct. We are not recommending substantive changes to the design guidelines for the so-called macro towers. Those have been in place for 20 years roughly and have served us pretty well.
Okay. And, okay, I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the community. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? And we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Any other discussion? Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to express my displeasure with this. I do not like the fact that these companies can put this in the right-of-way, poles up to 80 feet. When you look in different parts of District 1 right now in the A. Price Woodard neighborhood, we have 105-foot transmission poles. These poles would be about 20 feet shorter than that, which is still taller than the 65-foot poles that we have there. And although we are looking at trying to give some design guidelines to disguise these facilities, there's still a potential that we'll have junk poles on top of these tall poles we have now. Not being able to require co-location means even more congestion there. And I think what the public doesn't see is this is every 100 to 300 feet. So that's almost every pole on a block that would have this type of technology on there. And while I support it for lower income areas that need access to wireless internet, I do not support the possibility of junky poles on top of what we already have. So using this community for an example, if we have 105-foot transmission poles now, and then these companies come in with 80-foot poles on top of the 65-foot poles there, what does that neighborhood look like? And I just do not agree with that. I do not appreciate it. And I hope that companies are sensitive to neighborhoods, but that's all we can do is hope, because our power to really stop that is taken away from us. And I just wanted to voice my displeasure for the record, because this is deja vu to me. We saw folks go out into the community and talk about the possibility of poles, and then we saw 105-foot poles that was never said to the community. And at this point, we're hoping that these 80-foot poles will look nice. And I'm just not happy with that.
And I think everyone agrees with you. Unfortunately, our friends in Topeka took that power away from us. We've tried to work with them and offer up amendments, friendly amendments, offer up testimony where cities can have more authority on how things get laid out in rights of way. But you can thank all of our friends in Topeka. Councilmember Claycomb?
I do have one more question, Scott, and this relates to what, a little bit, to what Councilmember Johnson is, the frustration that all of us feel. Can we put in protective overlays for older neighborhoods for height and design requirements outside of this plan?
Yeah, the city council does have the authority to establish what's called a protective overlay for neighborhoods. Old Town, Delano both have city-established overlays, and so that is an option, yes.
And would that protect the right-of-way also?
It would not. No, the zoning overlay is only going to apply to the real property. The right-of-way is not zoned.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, it's a great thought.
Yeah, nice job.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. What are the consequences if the city council voted this down?
I think the major consequence is that you would not have design criteria published by April of 2019, according to the FCC ruling, and therefore would not be able to enforce the types of design requirements that I indicated for small cell facilities in the right of way.
Not only can they put them wherever, they can make them look like whatever they want.
Exactly.
So this at least allows us to put in design guidelines.
And we have been, the city engineer's office is the one that manages these right-of-way. We have been using these guidelines on an informal basis up until now, and so this will formalize that process and is required, by the FCC ruling for us to put the companies on notice that this is what our design requirements are.
So it's the only step they did allow us to do is at least put lipstick on the pig.
Yeah.
I think we're good. If there's no other comments, I would move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
Appointments, comments, Councilmember Claycomb, Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Tuttle. Can you all speak at the same time?
Sure, I'll do this really fast. Mayor, I'd like to do my DAB reappointments. So I would like to reappoint Gregory Bojan, Matt Brown, James Deckard, Bill Longnecker, Denise O'Leary Seamer, Angela Martinez, Linda Matney, Gisela Pena, Sean Rojas, Lorenza Snyder, and Joel Y.
Any others? That cover it?
It covers it. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also doing DAB, reappointments and then one appointment. I'd like to reappoint Anicia Brimley, LaWanda DeShazier, Dan Heflin, James Holland, Aaron Mays, Tadana Neal, Tom Scanlon, Joseph Shepard, James Thompson, and I'd like to appoint Tyler York.
Okay. And Councilmember Tuttle?
I also have DAB reappointments, Dave Babish, Sam Liddon, Mike Helstab, Nick Howell, Nazir Tracey, Tracy Adams, Paul Lavender, Janetta Everett, Keith Lane. And then last week, I'm sorry, I misspoke, and I accidentally said it was Charles Schwartz, but it's Charles Schmidt for the library board. And then I had appointed Adrienne Clark to the Access Advisory Board, but she has left District 2, so I need to retract that, and I will appoint someone else.
Okay. And I would encourage you all to provide your list to the most efficient clerk in all of the land. Move that we approve the appointments and amendments as mentioned.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Any other comments today? We've worn out our welcome. I move that we adjourn today's council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. We'll see if we're able to.
Councilmember Clendenin, thank you.
He doesn't want to adjourn. Motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned.
He can
Thank
stay.
you.
I can stay.